Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going around that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the park's hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner, says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, good morning, happy Saturday to you. I was up bright and early this morning, as were you, no doubt, if you're listening to me right now. That's a pretty bold manoeuvre at a weekend to be awake and paying attention at 6 a.m. Well done, you. Give yourself a pat on the back, and whichever coffee brand you're using, let me know. This is Alex Phillips. I'm going to be with you for 4 stonking hours filled with news and views, opinions, your calls. It's going to get wild in here. That's right, I'm with you until 10 o'clock today, so get those little matchsticks, keep my eyes open, bring the tea on, and let's have some fun, shall we? Because, if you're going to get up with the birds, you may as well make the most of your day. That's what I say. I'm pleased to announce as well that I'm going to be joined for the next hour by the one and only Peter Blexley, former Met Police detective, the man with the most sort of honeyed tones for a sort of, an East London hard nut.
South East London.
South East London hard nut.
May correct you there. There's a difference.
There is a difference. So there you go. Peter's going to be giving us all of his thoughts on today's front pages, and we want to know your thoughts and feelings on the stories that we're going to be discussing today. Our big top line, wait for this is a merry old topic of conversation. Our big question of the day is, how close is the UK to insurrection? How close are we now to some form of civil war? This comes after Nigel Farage, who's going to be joining us a bit later on in the programme, has done an exclusive sit-down with the Sun newspaper and warned of what he sees a huge fragilities and social tensions as a result of mass immigration. Various pundits out there and experts are now saying the situation across Western Europe is on tenterhooks. That comes off the back, of course, the ongoing rioting in Ballymena in Northern Ireland. We had the Southport riots as well last summer, but if you just Google any Western European capital city and then type in anti-immigration protests, you will find now that demonstrations against multiculturalism are commonplace in the West. And then, of course, you can see what's going on when someone actually tries to do something about it, like Trump is in Los Angeles, and there's rioting in opposition to government policy over there. You can't win, can you? And, of course, as things reach a tipping point, perhaps, in the United Kingdom, we've definitely already gotten there in the Middle East, haven't we? Overnight, Iran have begun their, I'd say, performative, theatrical strike back against Israel. They've chucked a few drones over the border and fired in a few rockets, pretty much all of which have been intercepted. I think a few seem to have landed in Tel Aviv overnight. We'll be getting the latest on that as well. But Israel say that their operation against Iran is still ongoing. America there at the defence of Israel. There was a bit of tentativity, wasn't there, the other day about America? Nothing to do with us. No, we didn't know about this. No, don't look at us. Don't you go after our troops in the Middle East. Our hands are clean. And yet, you have to realise that Israel struck Iran on day 61 after Iran were given 60 days by Trump to get around the negotiating table and sort out a new nuclear deal. So you're kind of like, really? Is that coincidental? Then when it seemed that the Israeli operation was a blimmin' success, to say the least, I mean, it seems a strange thing to be celebrating. Is it a strange thing to be celebrating? It's probably a good thing to be celebrating, but they have taken out so many of Iran's military top brass with precision. You realise quite how clever their strategies are, how long they have infiltrated the regime in Tehran, that America now seems to want to own it. Oh, that worked out well, didn't it? Yeah, look, they've taken out all the military commanders. Brilliant. They've taken out the missile building capabilities. They're striking the nuclear facilities. They seem to have the upper hand. Iran doesn't really have much with which it can fight back. So America all of a sudden is going, all right, yeah, we'll take part in that then. That looks like it's working out well. Anyway, Peter Blexley, where shall we begin with today's stories? Let's touch upon what is going on over in the Middle East. Netanyahu has called on Iranians to rise up. If anybody in the West is looking at this and thinking that the people of Iran are sitting there and, you know, screaming blasphemy into the air about Israel, they're probably wrong, because I think a lot of Iranians are quite pleased that some of these military top brass have been taken out, and might we now be inching towards possibly some sort of regime change?
Well, I'm old enough to remember the Shah of Iran being in charge of that country, and I remember him being deposed very well, and everything that followed, and the Ayatollah and the mullahs taking over. And quite frankly, since then, Iran has been overwhelmingly a threat, particularly to Israel, but also the West. It is, of all the Islamic countries, forgive me if that's a rather clumsy description, but it is, of all those nations, the most volatile, the most authoritative, the most repugnant regime in terms of any freedoms that their people might enjoy, and consequently it has been an avowed enemy of America for as long as I can remember. And if it had the capability, I know that Israel is the focus here now, but we cannot separate Israel from America when we talk about Iran.
Big Satan and little Satan, as Iran likes to call them.
Exactly. If Iran had the capability under its current leadership, it would happily wipe America from the face of the earth, let alone Israel, and of course they'd be quite happy to take us with them.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I remember J.D. Vance answering the question of an Islamist nation having nuclear weapons, and joked that it would be the United Kingdom, which is quite poignant, to be honest. But if Iran, as unstable as they are, as madly ideologically driven as they are, these crazy mullahs, the beardy weirdies that they've got in charge, actually want it to reach the end of times. They believe so much in Scripture that they would love nothing more than a big international conflagration, a World War III, because they go upstairs with their 72 virgins and that's it, job done, hands clean, it's all finished now. And it's just so dangerous. The biggest sponsors of global terrorism, all those organisations beginning with H, but thankfully this is sort of a long-term strategy, well, long-term in the medium to short-term. Israel has taken out most of Hezbollah with the blowing up walkie-talkies. Brilliant. The Houthis have been, now you've got an international task force trying to fight back against the Houthis, and Hamas, well, they've been pretty much chopped off in their prime in Gaza. And so you kind of get the impression, if not now, when? Israel saw this opportunity and said, we're going to go in while Iran's weakened. We don't want them to drag out these negotiations with America and make out like they're serious when they're not. They're just buying time so they can get over the line those nuclear weapons. And I think that, I, for one, am cheering Israel on.
But I think that this clearly very well planned attack by Israel on Iran leaves us a very long way away from any regime change in Iran. I'm sure there are many people, particularly women, that would like to experience greater freedoms and liberty in Iran, and perhaps they might want to see some kind of regime change, perhaps a more moderate kind of leadership in that country. But I still think we're a very long way away from that, and it is, of course, tense moments.
If I was the Ayatollah right now, I'd be checking under the bed and in the toilet system, because all of his buddies have been blown up as they slept in their own beds at night. I'd be pretty worried about my destiny. But, well, it's an ongoing situation. We'll be keeping you updated as things progress, really, because there's still a lot of kinetic activity, some might say, happening in the region. Now, let's talk... Well, did you see Question Time on Thursday? I must admit I didn't. I've got better things to do with my life than sit and watch... although, I think, you know, it was a more interesting panel this Thursday. But there's some fury as Labour Minister, who is Under-Secretary for the Treasury, turned round and told the audience that most of the people coming over on these dinghies are women and children. What? Should we have a look at that clip? Let's have a watch. Let's have a watch.
If we must.
Go on.
And when you see that the majority of the people in these boats are children, babies and women who have been...
No, they're not. No, they're not. We've got eyes. Why do they think they can gaslight us like that? Why did that absolute muppet of an MP sit there on national television and tell a blatant lie? And apparently his little snapback today has been, oh, well... I'm so noble and I, you know, shower myself in moral righteousness that I went down to one of these rescue centres. I've seen the migrants with my own eyes, and the day that I was with the Coast Guard, the dinghy that came in had women and children on it, and they'd had all these horrific burns, and it just changed my life, and I'm so broken-hearted, and that's what I was talking about. No, you weren't. You were just trying to lie to us. You were trying to pretend that the statistics, which show, I think it's 78% this year, of young men of military fighting age, 18-year-old men. We can see that when we see the footage of these people getting off the boat at the beaches of Dover. We can see what they are.
Indeed, absolutely. And if you look in the Sun today, there's more articles about yesterday's arrivals in Dover. Now, just before we came on air, I checked the Home Office figures for yesterday's illegal boat migrant arrivals, and they haven't yet updated the website for yesterday. So we'll have to rely for the time being on the Sun's estimate. They had people on the ground in Dover yesterday, and they estimate that about 600 arrived yesterday. So that will take this week's to over 1,000, because we had 400 on Tuesday, 52 on Thursday. As I say, yesterday's not clear. And if you look at the photograph of the young men in their grey sweatshirts, which they've clearly been issued.
Oh, yeah, because they all have their matching. Who's handing out those life jackets as well?
Yes,
that's what
being
I want to know.
bussed off to whatever hotel it is. They are young, fighting-age men. Yeah. There is not a woman or a child.
Does it send a little
seen among them?
Shiver down your spine when they're doing the sort of pointing there, like, you know, thank you, Allah, for my safe transit across the channel. I'm like, all right.
Like millions of other people, it concerns me deeply that these undocumented people, whose backgrounds we don't know, who we have very little way of checking in terms of against European or global databases, for example, we simply do not know who they are, where they're going, what their intentions are. Yeah. And I would suspect there are very, very big question marks over all of the aforementioned. And yes, when I see the various hand signs that I've seen from them, some representing a W for being winners, for example, it causes me huge concern. And as we know, with the rampant discontent flowing through this country, I am not alone.
No. Well, do you know what? On that note, let's have a little voice note, shall we, from Nick, who sort of responded to our call out on whether or not you think that Britain is heading towards a pretty dangerous and dark dystopian future. Let's hear what Nick has to say.
Morning, Alex. It's Nick Moore from Loughborough. I think we are incredibly close to civil unrest on a massive scale, bordering on civil war, because that is the intention of this government. It has two reasons for that. First is to give them an excuse for bringing in digital ID. And the second one is, in a state of disarray that would ensue from such a civil insurgence, the government could suspend the Parliament Act and actually suspend the next election, something that they would desperately do in order to stay in power, because under a fair general election, they haven't got a snowball in hell's chance of getting re-elected. Have a good weekend, Alex.
Yeah, do you know, it's a fascinating topic. I've been listening to interviews done by a guy called Professor David Betts, who is a professor of modern war studies at a university in London. I think it might be King's in London, and a preeminent expert on civil wars in other countries. He's advised governments and agencies and security services in lots of other nations, saying, you know, you look like you're heading towards something pretty bleak and this is how to solve it. And he's turned around and said, well, this is now Western Europe. This is Britain that we're talking about. And when he lays out all of these risks, when you look at these tensions erupting everywhere, I mean, in that regard, when you look at the way the government responded to the Southport riots, which seems to be very different right now to the Ballymena riots, but let's see how that progresses. But you realise that this government have looked at the situation in Britain and gone, we've made a heck of a mess of this. We're at boiling point. The only thing we can do at this moment is try and crack down on the domestic native population, force them into retreat, make sure they're too shamed or too scared to protest any of this stuff, and meanwhile have sort of nice words of comfort and encouragement for other categories, let's say. Put your weapons back in the mosque, please. That you realise that they are terrified of some form of insurrection at this point.
But Baroness Casey's report is going to be with us very soon. And there's yet another stonking article in The Sun today, where somebody who has seen sight of that report has leaked to The Sun that it is going to make a very clear and direct link between illegal immigration and child rape gangs, otherwise incorrectly described as grooming gangs. These are child rape gangs.
Yeah.
Don't let them off the hook by calling them grooming gangs. They're child rape gangs occupied completely by paedophiles. That's what they are. And when Casey's report comes out, and on this story I will trust The Sun entirely that they've had sight of it, and that link is made between illegal immigration and these child rape gangs, then what is the public reaction to that going to be? And that, of course, we are talking about it today after yet another child rape gang.
I know.
This time a lot from Rochdale.
Yeah.
Got sentenced yesterday.
Yeah.
And the depth of their depravity is utterly astonishing.
Let's pick this one up after break. I've got some questions to ask you about London and your time in the forces. But anyway, if you want to throw in your two-bit, leave me a voice note, be patched through to the studio, send me a text or a WhatsApp, whatever particular vehicle of communication you wish to apprehend. Here are the options as follows. If you'd like to call me, it's 0344 499 1000. It's your normal network rate. So that costs the same amount as ordering a takeaway tonight, except you don't have to pay to talk to us. The call itself is your standard network rate. You can use that and send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note, just as Nick did, that I can play out. I love those voice notes. 0344 499 1000. If you'd rather be a bit old school and send me a text message, 87222 is the number to utilise for that. Now remember, you've got to write the word talk before you send your text. Otherwise, it might end up getting sucked into some sort of vortex of Iranian drones and never make it down the masts into the talkTV studios. But just those four letters, TALK, ensures it's safe passage here to this sort of hotbed of activity in front of me. Screens galore, lights flashing all over the place. It's like working at Direct Line. We're on X at talkTV. And don't go anywhere, put the kettle on. Peter and I are back after this.
genuine speculation is just unhelpful. Whilst there's a lot of footage circulating online which shows the aircraft from various angles on the takeoff roll and during the impact itself. And there have been a lot of theories abounded from that. There have been some questions around the aircraft's configuration, so the position of the flaps and the landing gear. There have also been observations that suggest that the ram air turbine was deployed, which is a small device which juts into the airflow in the event of a power failure.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello and welcome back to the show. Now, just for the break, we were talking about, the uptick, let's say, or the link that the Casey report might come out with between illegal migration and the rape gangs. But I think what is palpable when you see the riots in Ballymena is the public have suddenly drawn a connection now, something I've been saying for a long time, which is if you're bringing men from different cultures into the United Kingdom who might have a different set of attitudes towards women, you are imperiling the safety of women, but in particular girls, our daughters, our little nieces. These are the people who are actually the most threatened. What does that say about a society?
And if they're not our daughters and our nieces and all that kind of stuff, they'll go to school with our kids or our grandkids. They're part of our communities. They're British. They live in our country. They should be protected. This country should be judged by how we look after the vulnerable. And for me, that's children and the elderly.
Yeah, it's not young men who are able to traipse over 5 different countries, pay thousands of pounds to a trafficker and then wind up in a 4-star hotel. They don't seem very vulnerable to me.
Absolutely not. And let's talk about these people convicted yesterday for their abominable acts against teenage girls, raping them in Rochdale. Mohammed Zahid, 64. Now remember Zahid, because I've got something else to tell you about him, right? Kazia Bashir, 50. Mushtaq Ahmed, 66. Razeen Khan, 39. Mohammed Shazab, 43. Nazir Hussain, 43. And Naheem Akram, 48. Let me remind you about that first name, Zahid, okay? Convicted yesterday for yet more child rape.
He'd already been convicted and been sent to prison, hadn't he?
2006.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
He was convicted for sexual activity with a 15-year-old girl.
That's right, the old pervert. Didn't he have an underwear stand down at the local market? And when the little girl came to buy her tights for school, he pounced.
Yes, he did. And, of course, he gave the girls that were the victims in yesterday's case, he gave them underwear. OK? I struggle to think of much more vile behaviour, to be perfectly honest, towards young girls, and it will be very interesting to see what sentences they receive. These are the kind of cases, and there are numerous cases like that, and I mean numerous, and there are also many other allegations which of course have not been properly investigated through failing police that looked the other way, social services that were too afraid to go into certain communities and act like they should have done.
Do you know what I've always found quite astonishing? I don't know if you've ever seen the moment where Susan Hall, the London Assembly member and leader of the Conservative group in the London Assembly, challenges Sadiq Khan and says, OK, we know there have been rape gangs up and down the country. What are you doing to protect girls in London? And he most arrogantly, defiantly, obnoxiously, cynically said, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, you're going to have to explain. What are you talking about? He's trying to challenge her to make her look like she's racist or typecasting people. But come on, right? London is probably the most diverse city in the entirety of the UK. We know that there are big Muslim communities in London. We know, I can name the boroughs and the districts and the councils.
Yeah.
And yet I've not heard of grooming gangs, rape gangs in London. There's got to be.
Oh, undoubtedly so, without a shadow of a doubt. But what I really want to point out to you is every day in my life when I don't hear the name Sadiq Khan is a good day. So you just ruined
I know,
my
he's
Saturday.
really vile, isn't he? I can't think of anybody who's more vile than him.
A really obnoxious little weasel, he really is. And look what he's done to London in his 2 terms, now in his 3rd term as London Mayor. Get on the Central line, get on the Bakerloo line. Absolutely abominable. People must come to this country, travel on those tube lines and go, where the heck have we landed?
Yeah.
And probably vow never to come here again.
They're disgusting, covered in graffiti now. I mean, look, when I lived in Brussels, the metro was like that. It was an absolute hellhole. You just didn't get on the metro. Whereas the tube has always had a sort of more efficient, polite, you know, being packed and stuff like that. But now, when you look at the crime statistics, the sexual assaults on the tubes, a woman who was actually raped on the tube, being used as a mobile bathroom for drug addicts, the homelessness. You know, it's got to the stage now that it doesn't matter what hour of the day it is. As a woman, when you go on the tube, you're in high alert.
Yeah. And I'm on high alert, looking out to ensure that, first and foremost, me or anybody I'm with does not become a victim of crime, but seeing if I can intervene or assist should the necessity arise.
Yeah.
You know, it's appalling. And hello, where's British Transport Police? Hello, where are they? Oh, probably celebrating Pride Month somewhere.
Let's talk about Ballymena, shall we? Because what we understand of this, it's 2 Romanian gentlemen, wrong word really.
14-year-olds charged.
Yeah.
2 14-year-olds have been charged.
We know that they needed Romanian translators, and so allegations are they're probably from the Roma community.
Yeah.
The charge is for oral rape of a teenage girl, which I think is just one of the most disgusting, disturbing things. Now, we've seen before, as there's charges against those 2, there's not much we can talk about that case.
Yes.
Those be the rules.
Yes.
But we have seen before, and people often don't hark back to that moment, but the Hare Hills riots.
Yeah.
Which to me were the blue touch paper for Southport, because what happened in Hare Hills, it was a Roma family. Social services have come to take away their children. Again, we don't have details of what went on there. The community kicked off in a big way, and the police had a sort of stand back and let it burn attitude. Oh, well, community relations, better not do too much. Let's wait for it all to calm down. I don't remember seeing televised trials and convictions of these people, but hey, a week or so later, when protesters went out in Southport, they had seen what happened in Leeds and said, right, let's take to the streets, let's go for broke.
And in Hare Hills, you know, double-decker bus got burnt out and the such like. And on that very note, let me point out, for clarity purposes, if need be, that if you take to the streets of Britain and you burn out a bus, a hotel, a shop, or this, that and the other, you're an idiot, OK? You're also a dangerous idiot, because if you're talking about shops and houses and hotels, people might be inside there and people might die. So that is a very, very foolish thing to do. And I wouldn't condone it or encourage it or excuse it in any way, shape or form. What I do understand is people's disquiet with this great, well, once great nation and how it is. And what's happened in my lifetime is that we've gone from being a very high trust nation into, and I believe catastrophically, a low trust nation. And what I mean by that, if you'll excuse me, is back in my youth, and perhaps misguidedly, there was trust in the police, teachers, clergy, a lot of trust and a lot of deference. And of course we know some of that was misplaced because members of the aforementioned were later revealed to have committed very bad things along the way, and we began to see some degree of accountability. But by and large, the government was sort of trusted as well. Local authorities were kind of trusted as well. There was a lot more trust for the establishment and establishment figures. Now that lies in tatters. All those reputations, any trust any respect for all those that I've mentioned has been shredded. We don't trust the council to fix the potholes and much, much more. We don't trust the police to police consistently in any way, shape or form. We don't trust the schools because we think so many of them are indoctrinating our kids with stuff we don't want them to hear. And so it goes on.
And we don't trust the government because of all of the fibs we were told during COVID. I think that was a bit of a final nail in the coffin. Now, talking about how things could get much worse, I foretell, and I don't want to be a doomster here, I hate those asylum hotels. I hate the fact that people can break into this country after spending a few grand on a people trafficker. They're not exactly the poorest in the countries that they've come from.
Yep.
And then they get put up in hotels and get, you know, the 4-star treatment, football tickets, yoga lessons, driving lessons. They can come and go as they want. Many of them working on the black market, having their mates over, smoking dope out the window, living their best lives. Way, great for them. I hate those asylum hotels. But I think this strategy of closing the hotels and dispersing these young men into residences of multiple occupancy in and around Britain is going to be a disaster. Because I'll tell you what, as a woman, I am not comfortable with an asylum hotel being in my town or city, but they tend to be, albeit out of town often, and everyone's contained in one place, and at least then you might have some idea of security and who's coming and who's going and who's where. If I was living on a street and all of a sudden my next door neighbours happen to be a house with 5 young men who all have nothing to do, they're not going out to work, they're not being kept occupied or contributing to society. I know they've come from countries where if a woman even flashes an ankle, that's considered titillation to the extreme. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Now, I'm sorry if people think that's xenophobic or racist, but look, I've travelled the world. I've been in many countries where men have a very medieval attitude towards women. I know what it feels like to be a subject of harassment, of intimidation, of fearing for your safety, of those sort of long lingering looks that you get from certain men that just wouldn't be socially acceptable in this country. And I just think putting these young men into houses where no one's monitoring them, no one's tracking them, right into the heart of communities, probably the poorest communities, and the poorest communities will therefore probably also have the most vulnerable girls. And you just think this is a powder keg waiting to blow.
And that's exactly what Rachel Reeves said she's going to do this week when she announced to Parliament that asylum hotels will be a thing no longer by the end of this Parliament. However, there's a smidgen of you defending the indefensible there, so I'm going to take issue with you. Those asylum hotels are an absolute outrage.
Oh, I hate them.
I get what you say about perhaps they're ring-fenced, almost literally.
Oh, I'd rather those asylum hotels with a Bibby Stockholm locked and bolted.
They shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
They simply should not be here. And instead, what have we had from successive governments? Stop the boats, smash the gangs, and in fact we've got now spread the illegals.
That's mad.
'Cause that's what they're doing.
It's so dangerous. It's going to be so disruptive to society, and I feel for those local communities who are now going to find they've got packs of young men with nothing to do, you know, wandering around past their front doors. I mean, look, I'm not saying everyone who's come over on a boat has ill intent, but if you've got young men of a certain age from certain cultures and they haven't got anything to do day in and day out, it's only a matter of time. And they are free to leave this accommodation and go a-wandering and a misdemeanoring, quite possibly, of course. And what does it do? What does every boat do? And OK, mathematically, it might be a tiny little drop, but each boatload dilutes Britain, British culture, British values, who we are, how we used to live, and what we treasure. Yeah.
Every boat dilutes that.
This open borders experiment has been nothing short of cultural vandalism. Let's read some of your messages before we ping off to break, because they've been coming in thick and fast. Derek says, watch Fiona Bruce continually savage Zia Yusuf of Reform. Insulting. Was the guy in the pink shirt a plant? Oh, it was the BBC, the Bolshevik Broadcasting company. I think the other day on Question Time, someone actually asked the audience how many of you voted Reform. About 5 people put their hands up. When you kind of look at the recent polling and you think, oh right, yeah, that's not really a fair representation of public sentiment right now. James from Wendover in Buckinghamshire says, are you now doing weekend breakfast? Now David has left. I do hope so. David will be missed, but you'd be the perfect replacement. Oh, why, thank you, James. Well, I'm definitely doing it this weekend and next weekend. Otherwise, watch this space. And David will be greatly missed, that's for sure. I can't think of a man with more colourful shirts or more vibrant personality in the early hours of the morning. I'm more of a doomster. David is sort of sunshine and pixie dust, whereas you got miserable old misanthropic me instead. That's right. Hey, that's how to begin the weekend. Talking about rape gangs and civil war. Whey! Clayton in Dartford says, morning, Alex. Perhaps we should have a straw poll on who is the biggest threat to this country, Putin or Starmer. Putin ain't Putin can, play silly buggers with cables under the sea and cyber attacks, but he can't launch some sort of actual kinetic attack on Britain, whereas Starmer's killing us from the inside. It's got to be said. Paul in Staffordshire says that we've allowed an invading army in to use and abuse us, and we've had the pleasure of paying for it. Exactly. Speak out and you're a right-wing racist. Oh no, better than that. You're a terrorist.
Yes.
Labour need ousting and Reform should be taking over. I mean, I heard, before we go to break, a bit of intelligence the other day, because I mingle with all sorts of people connected to all sorts of interesting shadowy organisations, and a particular foreign government have said to the United Kingdom, based upon their intelligence, we believe that of the people who've come over on small boats, you've brought in about 200, if not 300 jihadist trainers. Not the jihadists themselves, but the people who organise in the nice little, do star jumps in the forest, and here's how to, wang a machete about the place. That should fit 200 of those who are training people. And
or
also,
more dangerously, wire up a rucksack, for
wire
example.
up a rucksack, yeah. Commit mass atrocities like October the 7th on the streets of Europe, and it's probably in train if they had their way. But also that, these dinghies could be used as places to drop bags of weapons into the sea, which is how Hamas got a lot of their arms, not over the border from Egypt, but they drop caches of armaments into the sea, GPS, and then the tide does the rest, and someone goes out in the cover of darkness and collects it. And that's terrifying.
Well, funnily enough, this week, there was an article about the considerable number of waterproof packages of drugs that are getting seized in the Channel, because so many from the South Americans, and this is going back to my days when I was at Scotland Yard on the drug squad many, many moons ago. And yeah, they deposit these waterproof packages in there. Difference with those is that they can rise to the surface. How quite they manage it, I'm not entirely sure. But I would imagine with caches of weapons, yes, that's a possibility, but we need to remember that the Channel is a very, very busy shipping lane. It's the most busy shipping lane in the world. So whilst it's certainly not impossible and something that law enforcement and the security services need to be aware of, it would be challenging for them.
Yeah, but if you think you've got on a dinghy with your backpack, with your world's possessions, there's nobody scanning what's in your backpack, are they, when you get on those dinghies? No. You arrive just off, and
you arrive at Dover,
two miles away from St Margaret's Bay, and you drop your rucksack in the water.
Yeah.
Lord knows what could have happened, but
it remains a possibility.
Without doubt, there are direct terrorist links to the people traffickers, whether it's the terrorist organisations profiting from it, whether it's terrorist organisations putting their soldiers and creating cells and putting those people on the dinghies. We saw that with the arrest of 3 Iranians who planned the bombing of the Israeli embassy.
And if I can boil it down to an even more simplistic way, because I'm a simple soul, they've paid criminals to get on those boats.
Yeah.
What they're doing is criminal and against the law.
Right.
So isn't that surely against the culture and values of anybody who is a believer of faith, for example?
There's enough there. There's enough there now.
Or abides by the rule of law.
There's enough there to declare a national emergency, say this is about security, bam, international law is done, no more boats across the Channel. Simple. Right, we're going to take a break now, but when we come back, I'd love to hear from you. The number is 03444 99 1000. Come on, give a girl a call, would you? On her, I would say it's my inaugural weekend breakfast shift. I have done them before, but I kind of feel now we're in the post-David Bull era that it is a bit of an inaugural shift lift for me. So why don't you call me up and let's have some fun, shall we? 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial, standard network rate, etc. You can use that as well to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 8722 is the number if you'd rather smuzz. If you smuzz, you've got to write the word talk before your message. Right, these people pay my wages, so listen to what they have to sell and I'll see you on the other side.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there, welcome back, and hey, it is my inaugural breakfast caller. It is the hero of the hour. It is Barry from Norwich. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, Alex. Good morning, Peter. Yeah, I'd just like to say about this Labour government and these migrants. I personally think the Labour government are doing it on purpose, putting these migrants into these areas. I mean, I don't live in a very well-off area of Norwich, and the area where I live is full of them. Now, I'm going to give you an example of what happened to me the other day. I went up the city, and I went into a well-known supermarket to buy some milk. And outside this supermarket, there was about 6 or 7 Afghan Iraqi, sitting outside their phones, drinking alcohol, and there was school kids walking around on the way to school. And they were blatantly taking photographs and filming these school kids, right? Blatantly. Well, I could see it. So I said to them, I went, listen, what are you doing? Yeah, right. I mean, I speak no English. I said, listen, stop filming these young girls and taking photographs of these young girls. I can see what you're doing. We don't behave like that in this country. Yeah, right. You need to sort yourselves out. Well, down the road from there's been a bit of a big fire, and the police are guarding the building. So there was 6 police officers down the building and 3 police cars just sitting there. I spoke to these 2 police officers. I explained what had happened. I said, can you ring it through? No, we're too busy. They said to me that they were too busy to report what I'd just told them, what was going on in the city with these young Afghan Iraqi young lads. Now, that, for me, tells me that the Labour government are doing it on purpose. Yeah, right? They want to cause unrest. Yeah, right.
You really think they want to cause unrest? Because I would say the crackdown after Southport was quite the opposite. Now, I got my suspicions about this. I'm going to bring in Peter Blex. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, isn't there, Blex? So, first of all, let's talk about these young men taking photographs of schoolgirls. Look, it's very simple. If you come from Syria or Afghan or Iraq, you've never seen a blonde-haired woman in school, blonde-haired kid in school uniform. You've not seen it. All you've seen are women in hijabs and burqas not allowed to leave the house. And not only that, if you've been bombarded by pornography, and a lot of young men now, because of smartphones, have access to pornography, what are they going to see by and large? What they're going to see is all sorts of sick and twisted, perverted videos about twins and school kids and teens and things like that, stepsisters, you know all the sort of nonsense I'm talking about. They're also going to see characters like Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips. And guess what they look like? That's right, they kind of look like like me, in terms of colouring, hair. And these young guys will be coming from a country where they're told that women who don't wear hijabs are dirty, who they're lower than animals, that they can be taken as sex slaves in times of war. And they're going to be sitting there with nothing to do. Oh, discovering alcohol for the first time. Great, you can go down Lidl and get, a few cans and sit outside and watch the pretty girls go by. And you can't, it's a toxic cocktail.
First of all, credit to Barry for challenging
Yeah, well
them.
done, Barry.
Well done, Barry. And secondly, which was the big question I was going to ask, is, did you report it to the police?
Yeah, and he did.
Yeah,
And Barry did exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that. And what was the response he got? Oh, we're too busy. Too busy doing what? Guarding a crime scene or something, apparently. I mean, come on. But there you go, you see. On that note, because I can't let it slide, the police have been, like the civil service, and this is undeniable, have got so much of a left-wing indoctrination flowing through them. They really have. We've seen this. It gathered a pace in 97 when Blair got elected, but the grip and that whole mindset upon so much of the civil service, and in particular senior policing, really has created a rot which I think is very difficult to stem.
Yeah. I agree.
This is even better, Alex, right? I was voicing my opinion to this police officer, right, and I was explaining to him, you need to get someone down there, right? It's not right that you're too busy, rah, rah, rah. And this police officer said to me, you need to keep your opinions to yourself. I said, listen, I live in a country of freedom of speech and freedom of expression at the moment. And I said, I'm voicing my opinion. And he said to me, if you carry on, you're going to be arrested. Now, he was going to arrest me for voicing my opinion and not go up there. And I said, listen, if you want to arrest me, my man, be my guest. Here's my wrist, put the bracelets around, take me to the police officer, and I'll tell your desk sergeant while I'm down there. I'll also get a solicitor down there and tell my solicitor when you
I must come in here, please, if I may, Alex, Barry.
You get in there.
Because, Barry, what you were doing was not expressing an opinion, okay? What you were doing was reporting behaviour that you felt might escalate into serious crime. And this is a message for every viewer and listener out here. When dealing with the police, the language you use is very, very important, and you've got to use the right language, sadly, to shame them.
The all code to unlock the
Yes,
machine.
to shame them into action.
Right.
So, for example, if Barry had said, I've just come from the supermarket, correct location, accurate location, seen a group of men drinking and photographing vulnerable people, I fear this situation may escalate. There is going to be some challenging of them. You see, all of a sudden, vulnerable, escalate, challenging.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
not
yeah.
expressing an opinion. That's reporting a matter which you think needs police attention, because they will wriggle off the hook out of doing anything if they possibly can.
Okay, yeah.
Barry, thank you. Thank you so much for your call, my darling. We're going to shuffle off to another little advert break now, because, if we don't play the commercials, well, we're off air, aren't we? Got to pay the pipe or whatever it is. Anyway, here we go. I'll see you on the other side.
flight was leaving the southwesterly runway on the way to Gatwick, and as you said, it got to about 625 feet. Now, normally when these aircraft are getting airborne, normally for sound reasons, they do a very steep climb. Most passengers will know when they get airborne for their holidays, the aircraft go in a steep climb after takeoff up to 1,000 feet or beyond. So this clearly only managed about halfway up there and then crashed about 2 kilometres away from the airfield, so very close. The aircraft would have been at its most vulnerable because it would have been absolutely crammed full of fuel at the time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Right, Peter, did you see Rachel Reeves squirming about what's going to happen to migrants if she's closing the hotels?
Rachel Reeves, do me a favour.
Well, I'm going to do you a favour. I'm going to play it right now.
Yes.
I'm going to play it right now. You better buckle in and enjoy this one. Here she is, Rachel from Accounts.
Billions of pounds of taxpayers' money spent on housing asylum seekers in hotels, leaving people in limbo and shunting the cost of failure onto local communities. We won't let that stand. So I can confirm today that, led by the work of my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, we will be ending the costly use of hotels to house asylum seekers in this Parliament. Funding that I have provided today, including from the Transformation Fund, will cut the asylum backlog, hear more appeal cases and return people who have no right to be here, saving the taxpayer £1 billion a year. That is my choice, Mr. Speaker. That is the Labour choice. That is the choice of the British people.
Oh, there you go. Those hotels are going to be shut down at some point this term. Way, woo! Well done, Rach. Well done. And the big question to Rachel was, well, where are they going then? Because unless you can deport the whole lot of them, which you don't seem to be able to do and don't have any intentions to, and frankly, we're stuck in a Gordian knot of legalese nonsense, often preventing us from carrying out a deportation programme. This means, as we were discussing earlier, these people are now going into Serco-procured private properties to live hand by jowl, cheek by jowl, with other Brits, normally in the poorest of communities. Let's see how that's going to work out, shall we?
Stop the boats, smash the gangs, spread the illegals. That's what we've got now. They will be spreading them. For those of you who watched Rachel Reeves on YouTube just then, that dimwit Darren Jones was sat next to her. Him of the previous mention on the...
Him of it's only women and girls coming over.
Women and girls. Oh, surely he'd be up in arms if all these women and girls were going to be displaced from hotels. But hang on, there are only a fraction of the fighting age men who are coming over. It's utter lunacy. I so buy in to your theory of declare a state of emergency.
Yeah.
Because we are quite literally being invaded. Remember the trouble Priti Patel got into when she said it was an invasion.
Well, I know, yeah. First of all, Nigel Farage used the term invasion first. Then it became a thing. I think Suella used it, Priti Patel. You can see how far that Overton window shifted, that we're actually allowed to talk about this stuff now. Do you remember, actually? It was you and I, back when we were downstairs in those fancy pants telly studios, when Alex and Kevin, good old crosstalk, when that used to exist. And it was, we were sitting there on the show one day, and I was talking about being harassed in the street by foreign-born men. And you were sitting there, and that clip went everywhere around the world. It went viral around the world. And looking back now, I've realised, because I said in that moment something that hadn't really been said before, at least not on a television station, and it really got some momentum to it. But now, actually, people are talking about it all the time. You're hearing plenty of women. There's even sort of activist groups now set up about keeping women safe and the threat from foreign-born men. And here we go now. We're going to potentially have the damning review into rape gangs directly linking illegal migration with the exploitation of British girls.
Courtesy of Baroness Casey. And we all know how seriously her previous work has been taken, especially in regards to the Metropolitan Police, for example. That Casey report still looms large over Scotland Yard as the Met tries to get its house in order. Baroness Casey is very much listened to. If she's been fearless, if she's going to tell the truth, and if we're all going to hear it when that report comes out, it'll be very interesting to hear what this snivelling government has to say when it's confronted with an uncomfortable truth.
Do you know, someone was saying to me the other day, oh, well, we do so much work when people come over on the boats, these young men, you know, people come and present them in the hotels and tell them they're not allowed to get into women's personal spaces, and this is the way we treat women in society. I'm like, first of all, if you're having to send people in to educate men as to how to treat women, those men probably shouldn't be here. Second of all, do they honestly think when men are of the age of 18 and they've been told all their lives that women not wearing hijabs are shameful, that you know, non-Muslim women are dirty and can be treated like animals, where they've never seen a bit of bare flesh, albeit on maybe, you know, photographs of Western women, exactly the unwashed, unclean, dirty, you know, sub-animal beings, that they're going to literally sit in a migrant hotel with some Janet in a chunky knit sweatshirt and some big statement plastic jewellery
and a pride lanyard.
This is and a pride lanyard. This is my personal space. Please don't enter it. My pronouns are. They honestly think that these men come from war-torn countries where women are stoned to death for the privilege of having been raped, that all of a sudden, like the Men in Black pen, they're going to have their brains erased and be totally rewired by some sort of leftist government-sponsored group who comes to sit them down, sing Kumbaya and tell them not to sexually assault people. It's for the birds.
Yeah, they'll be changing their minds, won't they? They really will, yeah. It's utterly, utterly ludicrous. Can we have a quick mention before I need to shuffle out the door at the top of the hour?
You get to do what you like.
About anybody who picks up a copy of The Sun today, page 22 and 23. Nigel Farage gives a lengthy interview.
He's coming up at 9 o'clock, by the way, folks.
Yeah, well, let me just read out the sort of the main quote on this article, where Nigel says, I know the British people will welcome anybody provided they live by our rules. This is our country, these are our values, and our politicians haven't respected that.
Yeah.
It's not even up for debate, is it?
No, it's not exactly
it's
rocket
a statement
science.
of fact.
Yeah. And this is it. I mean, you know, when people talk about, oh, well, you know, we've got to help people to integrate. Well, what are you doing about it?
Yeah.
Because when I go to Whitechapel and get off the tube and I see that the sign for Whitechapel is also in some sort of Arabic scroll, when I walk down the street there and I see all the women in burqas, and when I, you know, walk down the street where I live and I don't hear the English language spoken at all anywhere, then I kind of think, great, yeah, the integration exercise is really working out, isn't it?
Yes, diversity is our strength, eh?
Oh, diversity is nobody's strength. This is the other thing. Why can't people just sit down and go, do you know what? If I was a sociologist examining the behaviour of human beings across time, I'd look at all the civil wars and the conflagrations and the wars and the conflicts throughout history and realise that we're tribal animals. We don't actually rub along merrily. We're not all one human race. And if you mix people with wildly divergent cultural backdrops together, especially in a country where they feel challenged by resources with an economic compression, you're going to end up with a powder keg.
We've discussed enough bad men today, right?
Yeah.
Bad men have had a bad press for the last hour,
right?
Let's talk about the lovely men.
You've got 1 minute to do it.
The lovely dads, because tomorrow is Father's Day.
There you go.
And it doesn't get the coverage that Mother's Day does, and that's fine.
All right, me too. The Men Too movement. Hashtag Men Too.
Here we go. But to the great dads out there watching and listening, have a lovely day tomorrow, even if it's only a text because they're a long way away, or it's a phone call, or it's a message, or it's a card, or if you're lucky enough to have a couple of your sons wrapped round me like I've got tomorrow. Oh, have a lovely day, Father's
But you know
Day.
what? If my mum's listening, can you pass that message on to Dad? Because I'm liable to forget come tomorrow with the early morning alarm. Oh, Peter, it's been wonderful having you in the studio. Haven't we had fun griping and moaning with our dystopian outlooks? Anyway, Peter Blexy, ladies and gentlemen, he's going somewhere. I'm not. Put the kettle on and I'll see you after this.
We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I'll do, mate, I'll shove a £5 in a pot and you can go and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide ride surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine a Scouser say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour ghost train.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show, or welcome if you've only just tuned in. I don't blame you if you've missed the first hour, because getting up at the crack of dawn at a weekend is a bit of a challenging exercise. I should know. I did it this morning, but it's all been worth it. I actually quite like it. It's a lovely time of day. I'll tell you what, normally I hate London because it's like apocalypse now. It's like the day after tomorrow. I walk down the street looking around going, I don't know this city anymore. It's been robbed of me. 10 years ago when I first moved to London, I loved it. I used to live in Westminster. I'd go down the pub, finish at about 11 o'clock in last orders, merrily walk home, 15 minutes back to my bed. I wouldn't dare do that now. Hell no, because that's how bad things have got. I put a photo up on X the other day, actually, of the nature of how just the main thoroughfare of commerce in my particular neighbourhood has changed, where you've got the Co-op and Boots having to board up one of their doors because they actually have to have now people come in and go out the same door because the looting was so intense. Then, in said Boots, they've got, it's mental, they've got this, perfume display counter, which clearly, Guerlain or Givenchy or whatever is sent to Boots and say, can you put this up to promote our new fragrance? And it's a big sort of, jazzy, colourful cardboard stand. And where the free samples are supposed to be, where the sort of option is to have a little sniff at what the fragrance smells like, they're not there. Because clearly some toe rag and ne'er-do-well would just come in, nick it and make off again. No, all the perfumes have to be behind lock and key and heavily guarded by a man in a uniform. Then you go down the road to Co-op, and now they've actually managed to open both doors to Co-op, right? Woohoo, well done. You can have an entrance and egress. But what they've done instead is they've actually put all their meat in these locked, hard plastic boxes with GPS trackers. Lamb chops in a little Fort Knox style container with a GPS tracker on it. I mean, are you kidding me? Is this what it is now? Is this what London looks like? Well, I tell you what, when you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and get a taxi to work and there's not a single other person on the street, it's actually quite a lovely city. You roll down through the river, sun coming up, the streets are quiet, you don't have those sort of ne'er-do-wells roasting chestnuts on Westminster Bridge. They're not there yet, all those illegal traders. The pickpockets, they're still in bed or counting out their loot. The phone snatchers, well, they're too lazy to get up at 4 a.m, plus there's no one to snatch a phone off. And all the perverts who follow you down the street, well, they're yet to get up as well. So for the first time in a long time, I actually looked at the city and felt safe. Because there was nobody around, because this city doesn't belong to the British anymore. It's been disgustingly and woefully handed over. Thank you, Sadiq Khan and successive governments. It ain't just Sadiq Khan's fault. We know he's responsible. Looking at you, Boris Johnson as well. Let's not forget what he did when it comes to immigration. Right, now I've got that off my chest. Let's move on, shall we? And pick up with Benedict Spence, who's a great friend of this station. Good morning to you, Benedict. Thank you for being up so bright and early.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm all right, my love. Now, let's hit up the Middle East, because I know that is where your particular area of expertise is. Let's get us up to date. There have been air raid warnings or sirens going off in Jerusalem now. Iran have sort of sent a few rockets, a few drones in, most of them intercepted. It seems some of them have actually hit ground. I think Israeli authorities are talking so far about 2 casualties. It may be more. What's the latest and what do you see happening over the next 24 hours?
I mean, yesterday what we saw was sort of a broader attempt to overwhelm Israeli air defences. And it's worth noting, people will talk about the Iron Dome system. The Iron Dome isn't designed for ballistic missiles. It's designed for sort of shorter range things. Actually, there's 2 other systems for medium to long range missiles, the Arrow and David's Sling. And the idea behind them has been always to intercept for sort of slightly longer, faster range missiles. But Iran, in the last couple of years, one suspects has been getting a hold of quite a bit of hypersonic technology from its mates in Russia and China, which understandably has this sort of thing that these systems was not designed, in fact, to stand up against. And so you're always likely to get things sneaking through, especially when you do it in those sort of waves and in the attempt to overwhelm Israeli air defenses. And that's probably what we saw last night. But nowhere near as devastating as perhaps it could have been once in the past, given Israeli operations to try and sabotage and take out a lot of these missile systems. I think it's very telling that Iran responded to these attacks, which were on military installations in Iran, by targeting civilian populations in Tel Aviv. And first of all, from a moral perspective, I think that speaks to the kind of regime that Iran is, that it's more than happy actually to just blow up civilians. The other thing, though, is that this is almost certainly, going to prompt a more significant Israeli response, because there is justification for this now. If you're firing missiles directly at civilian centers like Tel Aviv, I think you're entirely within your rights to escalate. What that means, I don't know. Is it going to mean that Israel would target Iran's oil infrastructure? Possibly. That would be a crippling blow to the regime's finances. But what might that then entail in terms of an Iranian response? Could that in fact lead it to start blocking up the Straits of Hormuz to affect global oil flow generally? So it's going to be interesting to see what Israel's response is today. But as we've seen, that this is a very serious operation. This is a full-out declaration of war. It's not sort of an individual operation. The aim, I think, is, if not actual regime change, then certainly to cause a lot of internal devastation within Iran that could see a lot of civil unrest.
I mean, do you think that Israel so far are looking like they're going to get a comprehensive enough job done? Because it's quite remarkable when you look at the precision targeting of military bigwigs over in Iran, the head of the IRGC, the chief of military staff as well. And they've taken out basically everyone who today would be sitting in a situation room determining what the response to this attack should be. We know that Iran has been relatively militarily weakened. Hezbollah with that fantastic targeted attack again, with the cell phones in their pockets all blowing up simultaneously. That Israel has looked at the situation. Look, Netanyahu has been banging on for 20 years about stopping Iran getting a nuclear bomb. We don't have any direct intelligence of how close or far they were away from that, but we know that they were not keeping their side of the nuclear pact. They never have been. And he's been banging on about having to intercept and get Iran. Do you think the timing is right? And do you think he's done a good enough, comprehensive enough job now to actually make sure that Iran cannot retaliate?
It's interesting, actually. I think Emmanuel Macron actually yesterday came out and said that Iran had reached, through French military intelligence, had reached a critical stage in its nuclear development. And I think if Macron is prepared to sort of sit there and say that, and he's been rather tough on Israel these last couple of years, then I think that speaks volumes about the information that the Israelis would have got. It's well known that Israel has penetrated Iranian intelligence and Iranian military circles very deeply for years now. It has been able to target people inside and outside of Iran. It has had people operating on Iranian soil. It's quite embarrassing for the Iranians, the levels to which Israel has been able to operate pretty freely in that country. I think that speaks to quite how unhappy a lot of people in Iran are with the regime. That you're able to, not simply implant Mossad operatives, but be able to turn people to your side. As to whether or not we've seen in this sort of early stages, whether or not we know if Israel has done a good enough job, we don't know. It would appear that places like Fordo have not been sort of too badly damaged. If Israel wants to permanently cripple Iran's nuclear infrastructure, it is going to have to roll out a higher caliber of weapon, basically. It's going to have to target the subterranean bases that Iran has. For that, it's probably going to need US assistance, and that would lead to a sort of a major escalation. As you can imagine, if the Iranians were to get wind that the US was actually involved in offensive movements against them rather than simply defensive. But, if it comes to that, I wouldn't be surprised, because right now, if you're Iran, your options are come to the table and negotiate with the US, which is what Trump has asked them to do, which is very unlikely, or it's to double down and go for broke and try and develop a nuclear weapon now, because that's your only way, in your mind at least, of being able to dissuade the Israelis.
And that's a huge gamble. That is a huge gamble, isn't it, in that regard? I mean, one has to assume or hope that they don't have the capabilities anymore. It kind of reminds me, talking about the sort of subterranean nuclear weapons and uranium development, which is under a mountain somewhere. It kind of reminds me of Top Gun 2, where they have to go and sort of strike this particular place in the desert. And fingers crossed they are able to do that. I mean, we do live in perilous times. It's very easy sitting here and looking at things going on in the Middle East and looking at what ends up being rather performative vengeance, for the TV cameras, looking at the Iron Dome and drones and missiles flying into Israel, that, Iran could turn around and go, ha ha, and there's worse to come. But you do have to wonder whether there is what they can do.
The tricky thing is, all of this will have to be remote, because I think an actual ground invasion of Iran is strategically almost impossible. And that when I say that, I'm not talking about Israel. Israel wouldn't dream of invading Iran on the ground. I'm talking about the United States. So if you want to achieve some sort of regime change, it is going to have to be organic, and you can sort of pummel the country all you want, and you can try to sort of foment a lot of civil unrest that way. But it's not necessarily a guarantee. We hear very frequently in the West how people are fed up with the regime, but it's very difficult to judge quite how critical a mass of people are upset with the regime, and whether that is ordinary Iranians, or whether that is simply a sort of a regional or ethnic-based thing. For example, in Balochistan, the Azerbaijan provinces in the north, and if it's more of a sort of a separatist movement. So we don't know actually if that would be possible. And the thing we need to remember is, of course, what happened in Iraq when the United States invaded and thought, oh, this is going to potentially lead to regime change and everybody's going to become democratic overnight. Didn't really work out that way. You ended up sort of solidifying the population against you and becoming very hostile. So there's also that possibility that the Israelis end up inadvertently creating a more unified Iran.
Let's talk now about what's going on in this country. A fascinating bit in The Sun today where Nigel Farage has done an exclusive newspaper interview with them, and he's talking about his fear of civil unrest with the current rates of inward migration, looking at what's going on in Northern Ireland, Ballymena, and then reflecting back on the riots of last summer, and equally looking at what's going on in other Western European countries. How much on a knife edge do you think that we are?
Right now, we're not. And I think that this needs to be made very clear. I think that there's a certain narcissism in the way that we are looking at ourselves and going, a civil war is inevitable and it's just around the corner. It's not. Something else is, and that's a form of anarchy. And that isn't because of the emergence of well-defined factions. It is because of the degradation of the capacities of the state. We're not sort of sat here yet and saying, well, we've got lots of different factions that are going to go happily to war with each other. What we're saying is that there is an increasing absence of authority. Now, Northern Ireland is different to the rest of the UK in that there has always been a relative absence of that authority there, which is why you were able to have a civil conflict there in the first place. When it comes to things like this, though, I mean, this is unrest because there was an alleged attack on a couple of young girls, a sexual attack. That's the sort of thing that prompts vigilante action or, you know, sort of pseudo-lynchings almost in any society. You don't need sort of great community tensions there for that sort of thing to happen if there is an absence of the state. But if we're talking about more broadly, long-term, the possibility for things like civil war, I'm not going to say, I've said it's not imminent, but that doesn't mean to say that it is impossible. And if you keep on fomenting differences between groups whilst allowing the degradation of state power, you make it more likely. And I think that it's lots of people will turn around and say, well, we already have one faction, that's the Muslim faction. Well, it's not entirely true. You have sort of the Pakistani and Bengali and Afghan factions, but they are not in fact the same as Arabs. Sunni are not in fact the same as Shia. People have different views on these things. The other thing I think is military capability. Actually, this is a country that does not have access to an awful lot of weaponry, and as far as I'm aware, this is not something that is as of yet a hot smuggling topic. Again, that can change, and that will change again through the degradation of state power. If, for instance, you have an open, porous border through which you can smuggle things.
But this is the thing. We're in a situation now that we know what is behind tensions. We know why the people are rising up and protesting and things are escalating into rioting. It is because of open borders. And one thing we can also tell is there doesn't seem to be, at least not on the table for the next 5 years while this government finishes off its tenure, any significant policy announcements or any specific programme of how to deal with this. The Labour government aren't talking about actually doing deportations to any significant number that would, I think, satiate the will of many British people. They're not able to stop those boats. They talk about bringing record levels of immigration down, but we're still likely to see it running in the hundreds of thousands. There's no conversation about how to reverse some of the societal damage that's been done through the social experiment of open borders. So you have to ask yourself, over the course of the next 4 years at least, what is going to be the moment that the faucet is open and some of the pressure is let out?
Yeah, and this is the correct thing to look at, which is that whilst we're nowhere near that situation yet, the rate at which things are changing and have changed has accelerated significantly, and the openness, the porousness of our borders and our sort of laid-back attitude towards immigration and also integration would allow that to change very quickly. At 4 to 5 years, I still don't see it changing too dramatically, but let's say the next 10 to 15 years, why not? The problem with this government is they do actually understand what the problem is, just for reasons unknown. They are too terrified to acknowledge it. And I thought it was really interesting how Keir Starmer did his whole thing of saying the era of globalization is over, and of course that we're an island of strangers speech. And then it turned out, came out and said, oh, actually, I regret saying that. And you think, well, why did you regret saying that? Did you regret telling people the truth? Do you wish you were able to get back to good old-fashioned lying? And then, of course, we saw Darren Jones or whoever it was on Question Time.
Gaslighting of that was absolutely appalling.
Exactly. Just, it was almost as if they'd gone, oh dear, we told the truth. Why on earth did we do that?
Let's remind ourselves of Darren Jones on Question Time, shall we? This is what he said.
And when you see that the majority of the people in these boats are children, babies and women who have been...
No, they're not.
you have got to take... No, look, I get this is...
North of 90% of them are adult men.
Let me be... No.
I mean, I'd love to say that that's the one-off, but I get the impression that the government's been lying to us about all sorts of things for a really long time. Perhaps not lying directly to our faces, although I do believe that has happened, but at the very least keeping information deliberately outside of the public domain. My feeling is, Benedict, before I let you go, let me know what you think. I think the government has given up on trying to unpick decades worth of pummeling the country with legal and illegal migration. They can't do anything about that, they've decided. Live and let live. Oh, well, we've made the mistake. I think now the only programme that they've got in their minds, the only card they think they've got to play is now controlling and oppressing the native population into saying, you're not allowed to think about this. You're not allowed to be concerned about it. If you are the problem.
The majority in any population is always the danger, and I think we need to remember that. That is always the view that any state will take, regardless of actual motivations or violence or anything like that of any other minority. A state will always regard the majority as the problem because they are the largest, most numerous. So I think we shouldn't be surprised that we get this perception of two-tier justice, two-tier policing in this country, and that it tends to be sort of, I don't know, white working class to middle class people who feel particularly stamped on. You should understand that is how your state views you. There are more of you than there are of anybody else, so it is going to be a lot more heavy-handed with you. And also, the state believes, because you are, sort of fully bought into the society at large, that you will actually respond to the authority more better. So just when you see these stories about two-tier policing or anything like that, bear that in mind. It's because the state fears you and your numbers rather than any minority.
I think you're right, and unfortunately I think the people realise what's going on. They know that that is the strategic approach. We certainly saw it in Southport and the aftermath of that, and if anything, I think it's acting to inflame tensions even further, but it has had the deterrent effect, and we can see what's going on in Ballymena, but we haven't seen similar copycat riots taking place on mainland Britain, at least not yet. Benedict Spence, thank you ever so much. Now, listen here. We're going to take a short advert break. When I come back, I'm going to be taking your calls. There's a couple of people lined up already. I can't wait to speak to them. If you want to add yourself to the queue to have some commonsensical catharsis, it is 0344 499 1000. Keep that number locked in your phone. You can phone up and register your interest, have a chit-chat at any point, and the wonderful Tommy will take your call, write down your number and call you back. The service here is impeccable. You wouldn't believe it. Anyway, that's also the number if you want to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note. Going to read loads of your messages after the break. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send me a text. Write the word talk before your message. OK, advert breaks now, but I'll see you after this.
This runway that the plane took off from may be rather too short. Is that a possible explanation for what went wrong here?
Indeed. I tracked the ground radar information, which has not yet been confirmed by the Indian authorities, and clearly shows the aircraft entering the runway at an intersection and initiating its takeoff roll right from there instead of backtracking.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Wasn't Benedict Spence brilliant? And Peter Blexley before him. Now, mind you, coming up at 9 o'clock, we got the big NF. That is right. We've got Nigel Farage. He's going to be on the blower talking to us about his rather astonishing piece that's been in The Sun today, where he fears civil unrest because of mass migration. Is he right? That's been one of our big call-out questions today. Now, talking about call-outs and questions, shall we hit up the phone lines and speak to Vic, who is in Dover? Good morning, Vic.
Good morning.
What's on your mind, my darling?
Right, I live in St Margaret's village, just outside Dover. Beautiful little village, love it. But behind my bungalow is a huge field. Now, at the top of the Bay Hill here, which the sea is only about 10 minutes walk from my place, there's always customs officers and so on, yeah? They let the migrants walk up the hill and point them to the motorway. And there's got to be civil unrest soon. I'm very glad that the Irish are actually doing something about it, to be honest with you, because it's got to that point here. Because in Dover, every other person is a bloody foreigner.
So hang about. Let's go back over this. So where you live, beautiful part of Dover, near the seaside, and the migrants are what? They land on the coastline and then they get pointed which way to go to get to the motorway?
Yeah.
Why? What, so they can be picked up by people in the black market, their little contacts?
Oh, probably, yeah. I've seen it before when I was in Dover. Picking them up.
Who's showing them where the motorway is? Who's doing that?
The customs officers.
That is absolutely astonishing. So they're not being detained, they're not being scanned or written down. They're just like, oh, well done breaking into the country. There you go. If you want to go meet your, crime mates, just up there is where you need to go. Have you got the number for your contact, the person that you paid thousands of pounds to? Oh, you're going to go off and be a drug dealer, are you? Well, be my guest. You can be picked up there by a criminal enterprise within, well, however long. You got your phone, didn't get wet, did it? Yeah, there you go. I mean, what a madness. What a madness.
Well, see, I mean, the problem being in Dover, these guys, these asylum people, driving around in top-of-the-range bloody Mercs and things, yeah? And the people here just can't cope with it. They really can't.
Well, this is it. There is an inextricable connection between crime, organised crime, the black market, and the people coming over on boats. They're not all sitting there in the hotels going, oh, it's so war-torn and horrible where I'm from. I can't wait to become British. There are a number of them who are out peddling drugs and setting up cannabis farms and doing Lord knows what, paying off their debt to their traffickers.
I thought I'd escape with everything by getting this lovely bungalow up there in a beautiful village.
Yeah.
But the house in front of me now, was a three-bedroom council house. They've just put a family in there, and their sons keep coming round to steal my parcels that are delivered to my front garden.
Oh, for God's sake, crying out loud.
But
I mean, where do these people get off?
The class is racist.
Oh, God. Vic, I'm so sorry. You sound like a man who's contributed all his life. He deserved a nice early, well, if it's an early retirement, but a retirement. We can chill out by the seaside and reap the benefits of your endeavour and industry for the past so many decades.
I mean, I used to love Devizes, so I used to live in Uphaven. Lovely, quiet life down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's completely bloody different.
What, Devizes?
Well,
I know that part of the world.
Devizes. I mean, I used to live in Uphaven and loved it out in the countryside, and I thought, well, this is idyllic for me.
Yeah.
But it's all going wrong,
It's going wrong everywhere. It looks like, well, there's still a few places which I think seem to be protected in this here Isles of the United Kingdom, but I'm afraid the spread is...
you can get away with it,
ain't confined to the big cities anymore, that's for sure. Vic in Dover, thank you ever so much. Astonishing story there. Let's speak to Anne, who's in Gwynedd. Good morning. Bore da, Anne.
Bore da to you. Two things. watching the programme yesterday and seeing the French doing nothing, I thought, Starmer, if he's got any bottle, why doesn't he just say, instead of throwing money at you, A, we want it back, and B, we're not going to give you the fishing rights that we gave you.
Right. There was this perfect card to play, wasn't there? We know how much the French love our whelks and our scallops and things like that.
Well, exactly.
And and instead he just went, oh, you want 5 years of fishing rights? I'll only give you 4. No, we want 5. I'll only give you 4. Oh, go on then, 12. So what? Where did this man learn to negotiate? What a fool he is. But I think you're right. You know, the French have been given nigh on €1 billion to deal with this issue. They're clearly not dealing with the issue. Somehow the Belgian police are able to. So it's not a case of, well, you know, we need more resources and these are reasons why we can't do it. No, you can. If the Belgians can, you can, OK? And I think that we're now perfectly within our rights to intercept a boat and take it back in the other direction and then get the people on board to phone up the French Coast Guard and say, we're stuck at sea under the maritime laws, you have to come pick us up. Because that's what the French do to us. Basically push the boats out. On your way.
The other point I wanted to make was, naively, I thought the Houses of Parliament was a meeting place for members who represent their constituents, who voted them in, not to support Starmer. Surely the backbenchers can stop the government if it's not in the interest of the people who voted them in.
Well, you'd think that, but unfortunately, most elected members of Parliament have no ideology. They're pretty venal and vain. They're there because they want to be a celebrity in their own town. They don't actually have any political philosophy or any particular conviction. They just want to maintain their seat as long as possible, cut a few ribbons and have the kudos of being elected and wandering around the Palace of Westminster with a puffed-out pigeon chest. I'm afraid a lot of them, that is what they're like. They don't actually have any vision. They've got no idea how the real world works. They're not particularly interested in representing their constituents. They don't care. They want the glory and the life in London. That seems to me to sum up most of our elected politicians at the moment. And you're right, they should be here representing their constituencies regardless of the colour of their rosette. If the people in the city, in the town that they are supposed to be representing in that parliament say, we want one thing, it is your job to be that line of communication. And they're just not doing it. They're not doing it.
Well, sadly, there's an extreme lack of talent in the members of Parliament, isn't there?
Yeah, no, like you say that again. I've got a question for you then, Anne, because I'm of the belief, and it might be a very unpopular position, but I'm of the belief, actually, that what we need to do is probably pay MPs more, but then make sure that we got quality people. Because at the moment, we're getting a load of dross, and most people, if they're very successful or have, achieved great things in life, ain't going to go and work for the salary MPs are being paid. Now, I know it's way above the national average. I get that, but it's a position of great responsibility. I think we should pay MPs more, give them far less to claim, make sure they can't moonlight in other jobs and sit on boards of companies or, have a sort of silent directorship or little alliances of lobbying and money they can take for it. No, you pay them more and you say, this is your one and only job and this is what's expected of it. And then also add a new layer to parliamentary recall. Because at the moment, we've got a ridiculous situation where we've got 2 constituencies. One guy's been charged with sexual assault. Another one's been charged with paedophilic activities. Neither of them have actually, offered to give up their seat. And so they're just sitting there. Because the Parliament can't do anything until they've been proven guilty. And you kind of think, I feel really sorry for the people in their constituencies who now have an MP who's essentially seat blocking. But anyway, those are my thoughts.
No, I do agree with you about wages. I never thought I would. But the expense, they are laughing at us. Tripping abroad, it's immoral. So a good wage, but no expenses. Most people would get on a train to go to work, not a taxi. Why fly to all these countries for, say, one chat with somebody on our expense? They're taking us for a fool. I'd love to know how much the members of Parliament, all of them, have spent on their expenses so far.
Well, I
ridiculous.
remember the good old days of the expenses scandal. I was working for BBC Wales at the time, and it was absolutely eye-opening. I mean, I worry more about some of the second jobs that they hold and how much their focus is on life after politics. Anne, thank you ever so much. Diolch yn fawr. Right, let's do some of your messages, and then we're going to go to adverts. As a bummie, says Karen, I was called a racist when I predicted riots in Telford 20 years ago. Now, illegal migrants are living in hotels and being looked after better than the locals. There are very poor areas of Telford, and it is a tinderbox that could ignite at any time. Jason in Bristol says, can I just say we don't have to accept any of these illegals on these boats. For as far as we're concerned, it doesn't matter what country they come from. Originally, they come from France. End of story. Jane says, good morning, Little Red Riding Hood. Oh, you like it, do you? Trying to be a bit summery today. Unfortunately, I do think there will be a civil war. Why? Because this shambolic so-called government will not listen. In fact, I'm stunned it's not happened already. Everyone I speak to has had enough. Had a great day by Gloucester Docks recently, says Jane. I'm glad you liked it down there. Just listen to your monologue on early morning London, says Michael. How very true. It isn't our London anymore. Well, it's not. Last time I checked, I barely see anybody. I mean, if you look, it's fascinating, right? You look at the map of London and you look at how people vote. The Conservative band is all around those outer boroughs. Most actual Londoners have been pushed out of the city and live in Essex and live in Kent. Nobody's in London anymore who's born and bred here. So few, I'll tell you that much. Oh, that's a wonderful thing. We should all celebrate that, according to Sadiq Khan. Well, I don't. Sorry to let you know. We're going to take a short break now. Now, if you want to join the conversation, the number's on the screen. If you're listening on the radio, get a pen and paper or try and have a Forrest Gump style processor in your brain so you remember these exact digits. 03444991000 is the number to dial if you'd like to register your interest to be patched through to the studio to have a chit chat a bit later on. You can use that number as well to leave me a voice note on WhatsApp or indeed send me a message. 03444991000 if you'd like to send me a good old fashioned text message. 87222 is the number. For that, you've got to write talk before the content of your message if you choose to use that particular approach. OK, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, we're going to be talking to the former chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, on what is going on in the Middle East.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, you'd have had to be living under a rock or at least been on a very long vacation without any sort of television or radio or newspaper at your disposal to have not noticed that things are getting pretty tense over in the Middle East. Israel has been carrying out a campaign targeting nuclear facilities, armaments manufacturing sites in Iran, as well as taking out some of the top brass of their armed forces, crippling a response, some might say, but Iran has to respond, and respond it has done overnight, barraging Israel with missiles and drones, many of which have been intercepted and failed to actually hit land, but unfortunately some of them have done. So we're now in a situation, one assumes, that things will just continue to escalate. What might happen next and what can be done. Is this the right strategic approach by Israel? Let's get the opinion of Tobias Ellwood, who's the former chair of Defence Select Committee. Tobias, do you think that Israel has actually pulled a blinder with this, taking the opportunity, day 61, after Iran was given 60 days to get around the table of a nuclear deal, saying, right, we've had enough? French intelligence, at least according to Macron, seems to be saying that they back up the idea that Iran was getting perilously close to developing nuclear warheads, and that Israel's looked at the situation, realised that Hezbollah are weakened, that Hamas is weakened, that the Houthis are relatively weakened, and that Iran itself might be running empty when it comes to their ability to fight back, and said, this is it, this is the moment, we're going to go for it. Or is this a reckless move by Netanyahu?
Yeah, I mean, you sum it up perfectly. This is a very complex issue. It's not straightforward. It's worth recapping the backdrop to this, because since the Iranian Revolution in 1979, Iran has pursued a very destabilizing political influence right across the Middle East, from Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, and of course in Gaza. My frustration as Middle East minister is, why weren't we doing more over the last decades to check this corrosive impact on the Middle East? It's also funded and trained large militias, including, of course, those that you've just mentioned, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. These groups have been hit hard. They are on the back foot. And Iran itself was attacked last October, in fact. So their air defenses are diminished too. And Netanyahu has made it very clear that he wants to degrade Iran's nuclear weapons program. That poses the biggest threat to Israel. What's puzzling is, why now? Why drag America into this? Because if there is a major attack, it does escalate, America will be drawn in. And it will also affect other economies as well. It does look like Netanyahu has jumped ahead, forcing Trump's hand, who has no choice other than to stay loyal. But as you imply, we should be conscious of not only retaliation, but of escalation as well. So there are questions to be asked that, as no side looks like they're going to back down, but nobody is in control of events. And where will this go? This does affect us all, don't forget, because if Iran, that controls the Straits of Hormuz, I think 30% of our oil passes through there. The Houthis control the Red Sea in North Yemen. They could easily disrupt international shipping again. So this is an odd but dangerous turn of events, and our world is now living in ever more dangerous times.
Why isn't Britain backing Israel? I mean, there's been a mealy-mouthed response from Starmer. First of all, you know, so it started to go down the route of condemning Israel's activities in Gaza, but has made it plain that the UK is not strategically aligned with what Israel has done, but sort of slightly mollifying his language now in a phone conversation with Israel, saying, well, of course, you do have the right to protect yourself. Surely behind the scenes, there must be a slap on the back, thank you ever so much, because what you're doing is preventing the greatest sponsor of global terrorism from getting world-destroying armaments.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it that simple, it's very straightforward what should be done. But just like America going into Iraq, you know, this is a close security ally, a friend of us, and if they are doing the right thing but in the wrong way, then we should say so. And the biggest criticism, not of Israel, I stress, but of Netanyahu, of the prime minister, is how does he take advantage of and translate battlefield successes into long-term strategic objectives? Because if you haven't got any strategic objectives, all that follows war is more war. And as I stress, there's nobody in control of events now, because there's no overall power, not even America, knows where this might all unfold. And whether it's Gaza or indeed Iran, it's not clear where Netanyahu finally wants to actually go, other than just attack and attack. And that, I can say from a military perspective, is not enough.
Is there potentially a window of opportunity? I mean, Netanyahu's come out and said to normal Iranians, rise up, now is your opportunity. You know, your regime has been weakened. We've taken out some of the top military brass. Now is the moment that you might get to have a change at the top and live in a more open and democratic society. Is there a window of opportunity, do you think, for that to happen?
Well, you touch on something very interesting indeed. I would like to see it, you know, that Iran could live in a much more prosperous, peaceful world if it didn't have this extremist regime in charge. But is that Israel's? Is that Netanyahu's objective? If it is, then make that very, very clear, and then get allies to then support that. it would be, I think, illegal in international terms, but perhaps nobody cares about that anymore. The question is, what is the strategy? Now that you've got Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and indeed Iran on the back foot, how do you then get the population to then rise up? The trouble is, and we see this in Gaza, I'm afraid, as well, is that when a country is on the back foot, when it's attacked in this way, often people rally around the leadership as well. It has the opposite effect of exactly what you want. So it needs to be a more cognitive approach to dealing with what I said has been a poison in the Middle East. I go back to Trump 1.0. You might recall, I think it was in January 2020, when he sent a drone attack in to kill General Qasem Soleimani. He was in charge of the Quds Force, in charge of the capability to support those three militias. That was a moment to really lean in, but then nothing else happened. And now we're in this dangerous situation of things escalating. What will Russia do now? Russia doesn't want to lose its ally in Iran as well. So there needs to be some statecraft that now takes advantage of where we are today to make sure it does not escalate, but absolutely we keep the pressure on Iran.
We live in very tense times, that is for certain. Tobias, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme. Always a voice of common sense when it comes to geopolitics. Right, let's do some of your messages before we go to break. Otherwise, I never have a chance to get through them, do I? Mark in Wootton Bassett says, loads of friends of mine are all considering leaving the UK, including me, as this migrant crisis gets worse. How sad things have become. It's not just the millionaires fleeing. It is ordinary people who are saying, I don't want to be in this country anymore. It's been stolen off me. It's not mine anymore. I don't want to be here. I don't feel comfortable being here. It'd be interesting to get statistics on how many people have decided to make themselves expats. What a terrible indictment of your own country if people actually are wanting to flee it. I'd be interested to see as well the number of people who've decided to flee London. I'm one of them. I'm getting out. In a month's time, I'm gone. I'm not living in this hellhole anymore. It's only a matter of time before I get mugged or assaulted or harassed, so I'm just not bothering to stay here. Why am I paying through the nose on rent in a city that, frankly, poses a danger to me personally? Mike in Erith says there will be a civil war to force a general election. We need a general election as there is nobody in Labour nor the Conservatives that's capable of leading this country back to where we once were, the most powerful island nation in the world. I'm a Reform member, and I back Farage 100%. We'll be pleased to know he's coming on the programme at 9 o'clock. I wrote something the other day on my Substack about this, and I said, well, look, if we're going to get, let's say there is a change at the top and Reform managed to win the next general election and form a government in 2029. Now, in order to conduct significant levels of deportations, you've first got to unpick and dismantle the entire legal system. So you need to leave the ECHI, you need to uproot and pull out the entire legal canon that would be used as case precedent in ongoing cases. You probably need to get rid of the Supreme Court. You need to scrap the Human Rights Act. All of this stuff would have to be done with a very significant majority in Parliament to get it through. And make no mistake, the lawyers will clearly try and legally challenge such an ambitious approach, such an audacious approach to changing the way things operate in this country. So I would estimate that that alone would take at least 5 years, which then puts you up essentially to something in the region of 2035 before any programme of actually changing things and mass deportations could be carried out. So we're talking, therefore, from right now, about 10 years' time. Can we hold that long? Can we? I'll be asking Nigel about that after 9 o'clock. One more message and then we'll go to break. Dan from Kent says, the caller Vic, who was in Dover, is right, Alex. I live about 12 miles from Camber Sands and migrants drift through our village. I stopped a police van that was ushering them one day and asked, why are they not picking them up? The officers laughed and said, we've got nowhere to put them. I mean, you know, I was sent a little meme the other day of what happens if you break in illegally to other countries. Okay, I'm going to see if I can find it. Excuse me for playing on my phone during work hours, but I think it is quite. I cannot promise the veracity of the figures in this, but it is an interesting. It is an interesting context. Penalties for illegal entry. Singapore, 6 months in prison. Russia, 2 years in a labour camp. India, 8 years in prison. Pakistan, 10 years in prison. North Korea, the death penalty. Middle of Europe, free housing, healthcare, education, food, public transport, cell phones and cash. Make that make sense. OK, we're taking a short break now, but when I come back, it's going to be time for all of the big sports stories for this weekend with Tom Clayton. Don't go anywhere.
You can't try and snipe at the Conservatives for things that weren't our fault.
Oh, I mean, I
This
haven't
is
got
not one.
time. So tell your big mate Donald Trump to tell his big mate Vladimir Putin to stop killing people, then we can solve that problem like that. Are you going to be a net contributor to our society? But are you going to better the lives of the people already here?
You won't be surprised to know I disagree.
Why? Why do you disagree, though? Why do you want our young people left on the scrap heap? The court's time being wasted laying down a ruling on what is a woman.
This runway that the plane took off from may be rather too short. Is that a possible explanation for what went wrong here?
Indeed. I tracked the ground radar information, which has not yet been confirmed by the Indian authorities, and clearly shows the aircraft entering the runway at an intersection and initiating its takeoff.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Now, as my wonderful dad Johnny would say, it's time for a bit of spot. Hello, welcome to the studio.
Good
Tom
morning.
Clayton from TalkSpot.
TalkSpot.
Yeah, he always calls sports spot. I have no idea why, it's a family thing. Anyway, what is going on in the world of sport today?
Well, there's lots going on in the world of sport, but interestingly, I think our biggest headline is actually from the royal family, because they've announced the King's Honours list for this year. And there's a couple of interesting names on there. First of all, we knew that David Beckham was going to get a knighthood, as was previously
Apparently
reported.
He's been haggling for that for quite a long time.
He's been going for it for a
that.
long time. That's why he just... Well, I mean, obviously his philanthropic nature dictates that he also... You know, that's the reason why he does charity work, and the knighthood is just a side thing. But, you know, of all of the sports stars in the country that we've had in the last 25, 30 years, you probably think he's probably up there with one of the biggest.
He's done a lot of stuff.
He's done a lot of stuff. And now, as I say, lots of charity work, and he does other things in the world of sport. I think he deserves it, fully deserved. Interesting one, Luke Littler, the 18-year-old World Darts Championship. He's been given an MBE.
Do you know what? I love a bit of Luke Littler. It's got everyone well into darts, which is brilliant. I've been enjoying watching it ever since he first sort of burst onto the scene. But I do have this thing with that. You're 18 years old. This is supposed to be about, you know, honouring someone for a lifetime of, you know, giving to the community. I think it's great that he's doing brilliantly well at darts, but he's just doing brilliantly well at darts. His reward for that is sponsorship and cash money.
Yeah,
I think it's a bit weird giving an MBE to him. Not that I dislike him. I'm actually a big fan, but I just kind of think...
I'm inclined to agree, because I sort of think we're at this stage now where, for me, if a sports star is going to get awarded with something, firstly they have to do something utterly remarkable. And what Luke Littler's done, by the way, is nothing short of brilliant. He's been phenomenal. He's changed the world of darts, and he's brought it to the forefront of the sporting world, which is incredible for what it was. But then for me, I look at other people who've been handed awards. It's taken Virginia Wade 47 years. She's been named in the honours list this year with a CBE. And I sort of think, why has it taken her that long, but Luke Littler gets an MBE when he's 18?
You do sometimes think a lot of it is done by the headlines and the flashiness and like public mood.
I'm a fan of awarding sports stars with awards. Like Andy Murray gets a knighthood. Lewis Hamilton's gotten a knighthood because he's won 7 Formula One World Championships. But I just think it's better when it comes later in the career, when it's longevity and it's services. It's not just he had a good year and he's the best in the world. It's a case of what have you done
for the sport? What have you done for your country?
Exactly.
I mean, this is it. Like, you know, I'm a big Formula One fan, and I thought when Lewis Hamilton was knighted, it was absolutely wonderful. I'm actually not the biggest Lewis fan, believe it or not, but that man has been a fantastic ambassador for the sport, for this country, for black kids who see him as the first, you know, man of colour. Not that I'm a DEI person, but
he has his own projects to try and get. You know, to try and make motorsport more appealing and more widespread, and to make it less of an elite sport, because he grew up where his dad had to work multiple jobs and he was living in a caravan for a little while, and you know, he's faced all that adversity to become the best in the world.
And also, whenever you see that man interviewed, he's nothing but gracious. He actually, I mean, you know, think what you like about Lewis Hamilton. I've never heard a bad word come out of his mouth. I think he's a real credit to this country. So good on him, Sir Lewis. Of course, that wasn't this year, that was last year. He never uses it though, does he?
No, he doesn't. I think it's one of those where where he himself, since earlier parts of his career where he maybe wasn't as humble, I think he has embraced humility, where he's very much still, he sees himself as Lewis Hamilton. He doesn't see himself as Sir Lewis Hamilton. He doesn't like to put himself above other people. He just works hard and gets the job done, which is one thing I think is really respectable about him.
Now that segues nicely, doesn't it, into sports this weekend, because well, hey, it's the Formula One, the only sport that I have any platform in which to talk about, because I know what it is and I watch it avidly.
Yeah, we're at the Canadian Grand Prix this weekend. We're through 2 practice sessions that were late last night. I watched the first one. I didn't watch the second one because I was in bed, because it was at about 9:30 in the evening. I thought, I'm not going to stay up just to watch practice sessions.
I love that. Us who do breakfast shifts, it's like 9:30. That's like, you know, clock strikes midnight.
Honestly. Charles Leclerc had a bit of an incident where he crashed into the wall and he put himself out for the session. I don't think there'll be any doubts going into qualifying today. George Russell, another British driver, looking to win the first race for Mercedes this year. He was fastest in practice.
Oh, really? So the Mercs are doing well around
Canada. The Mercs are doing well.
If you look Gilles Villeneuve circuit.
Yeah, if you look at the practice session 2, which is usually the most representative time of qualifying of the race because it matches the conditions that we're going to have in the qualifying of the race, Russell was fastest, Norris was second, Kimi Antonelli in the Mercedes was third, which is really interesting. So the Mercedes really turned it on. Lewis Hamilton a little bit further behind, but yeah, I think it's going to be quite an interesting race. Max Verstappen's nowhere.
Oh, really?
Absolutely nowhere. Oh dear.
Oh, let's see if the Wall of Champions might find him, though. That famous wall.
He's already found the Wall of Champions.
Has he found that Wall of Champions?
The F1 this year have done this remarkable graphic where they're measuring how far away people are getting from walls. And he got to within 1 millimetre of the Wall of Champions, so he's very, very close.
For people who don't watch F1, that is this massive wall as you come around the last corner, and it often claims a Formula 1 driver. We were going to talk about the FIFA Club World Cup, but actually you've got to go and do your bulletin.
I do. Let's put it this way. It starts tonight. Some of it's live on talkSPORT. Not many people have bought tickets. Not many people care. But I'm not allowed to say that too loud.
Oh, you shouldn't have said it, Tom. Right, go on. You go do your bulletin. Thank you ever so much for joining me in the studio. So there you are. At least there's sensible sport on this weekend, which for me, a sensible sport is any sort of a sporting occupation that comes with a severe risk of injury, maiming, or even death. Because I quite like that sort of gladiatorial approach, the high adrenaline, high impact stuff. I like my men to be men. That is right. So there you go. I'll definitely be going home to watch the qualifying for the Canadian Grand Prix a bit later. And no doubt we'll be watching it tomorrow as well. Right. I'm still with you for the next 2 hours, and there's so much more to discuss coming up after the next break. I'm going to be joined by Rafe Hadel-Mancu. You know Rafe. We all love Rafe. He's got one of the best dirty laughs in the business. If you want to speak to Rafe and I, if you want to throw in your 2 bit about any of the topics we've been covering today, the number is on the screen. 0344 499 1000 is the number. If you'd like to be patched through to the studio, the lovely Tommy is ready to take your call and do a bit of vetting. Make sure you keep it clean. And that is at your normal network rate. You can also send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on that number, 0344 499 1000. If you'd like to text me, it's 87222. Remember to write the word talk before you send a message. Let's do some of your messages now before the advert break. We've got Mike in Rhodes. He says, Calamera, Alex, watching your show from Rhodes. Lucky you. I'm another statistic. Luckily, I got my Greek residency last year after jumping through hoops to get it. Unlike Blighty, where everything is handed to people who arrive in the country, I'd quite happily see out my days here in the birthplace of Western democracy while Britain moves away from democracy. Just going to nip onto the balcony for a brew in the sun. I'm not going to say I'm not jealous, because I really am. Listen to this. Richard Costa del Sol. We moved to Spain. Had enough. The country's going down the WC. We also moved legally. And good to see you in the morning, Alex. We lived in Portugal. Oh, blimey, international audience and all these escapees. When retiring, we always wanted to come back to our home country, the UK, back in 2013. We honestly hate the way things are here and just wish now we'd never come back. Unfortunately, we cannot afford to leave now, but we'd be gone in a heartbeat if we could. What a shame to hear all these people leaving this nation, people who are the real patriots, who we need to defend the nation. But you know what? I don't blame you one bit. Right, we're taking a short break now, but I'm with you all the way through till 10 o'clock, so don't go anywhere, and I'll see you just after this.
talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently going to build in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alice in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going around that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner, says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Yeah, moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. 2 hours done, 2 hours to go. I'm having a whale of a time. If you haven't been here for the last 2 hours, well, welcome aboard. Better to have you late than never, right? I don't blame you. It's pretty difficult getting up at the crack of dawn at a weekend. I did it. Quite liked it, really. As the sun came up over London, it was quite a pleasant little vista. There were no people wielding machetes or stealing phones at that nice hour. Felt safe. Now, I've got a bit of breaking news for you as we enter back into the second half of the programme, because we have the latest statistics on the invasion of young men from foreign climes crossing the English Channel. Well, yesterday, you'll be pleased to hear that 919 people broke into the country illegally, having paid ne'er-do-wells, people traffickers and criminal cartels thousands of pounds for the privilege. 16,183 have thus far arrived in 2025. Since Starmer has become Prime Minister, it's 39,425. So there you go. Isn't he doing a fantastic job of smashing the gangs, ladies and gentlemen? Come on. Woohoo! Yeah, really having an effect there, aren't you, Sir Keir? That is a slow clap of sarcasm and doom. Right, let's pick up that story and a number of the others rattling around inside the newspapers this weekend with the one and only Rafe Haidel-Mancu, historian and commentator. Rafe, great to have you on the programme. Let's kick off, first of all, with these numbers. I mean, they're not really surprising anymore. It's become so normalised, hasn't it, tragically?
You're absolutely right. You know, I always try to explain it to people in this way. In the 1990s, our entire net immigration figure for coming over to the UK annually was 50,000 people. 50,000 is now what comes over the channel alone. That puts it into some context, I think. We've never seen anything like this. We have imported a fifth column into this country. We have imported young men of fighting age, and we've put them not into barracks as our soldiers do. We've put them into 3, 4, 5-star hotels with spas attached. It's absolute lunacy. It also goes to the deeper question of showing that successive governments, whatever their stripe, seem incapable of getting to the root cause of all this. A large part of that is because, of course, our institutions have become corrupted. You know, we have, as the Americans call it, a deep state, but we have, or the blob, if you want to call it now. Dominic Cummings just had a very good speech published in The Spectator on this very similar topic. It doesn't matter what our politicians do, it seems, because the people that really wield power, the civil service, have no real desire to actually tackle any of this. We know, for example, that the Home Office has a far higher rate of approvals of asylum applications than almost anybody in Europe. In fact, it's double many countries in Western Europe. We need to have a real understanding of what's going on and why it's happening.
Do you think that this pushes us ever closer to the brink of disaster? Looking at the scenes that have unfolded in Ballymena, thinking back to last summer, the riots after Southport, looking at the sort of uprisings and protests that are happening across all of Western Europe at this point. There are some people out there, including Nigel Farage, who's very worried about civil unrest in the context of mass migration. Do you think that we're on a path to some sort of civil war?
Well, yes. Well, we need to understand what we mean by civil war. Now, you've quoted Professor David Betts, for example, the Professor of War Studies at the Department of War at King's College London. But even he doesn't say that the type of civil war he's talking about is what we think about, you know, the American Civil War or the English Civil War. What he's talking about is something closer to what we had in the Troubles in Northern Ireland, where we had the British state with tanks on the street and so forth, but actually the fighting was between two groups with grievances. So Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland, what people would say would become the sort of tensions, the sort of internecine fighting, would essentially be low-level fighting akin to basically what you saw in Northern Ireland, terror attacks, skirmishes, rather than full-scale street-to-street fighting. And it will be between two groups. One is the radical Islam, the Islamists, and on the other side, the white identity movement. Now, the white identity movement is tiny. You know, it's a molehill compared to the Islamist mountain. But this is a process of around 20 to 25 years. And when you're talking about civil war, I think people need to understand this. They look at things in terms of the classic insurgency, which is a Maoist insurgency of three phases. And of the three phases, the Muslims are in the second phase. The white identity movement is still only in the first phase. The first phase actually is a 20-year project where you try to recruit people to your cause, as we've seen radical mosques trying to do, radicalize people with stories of victimhood and grievance. They try to, of course, to use propaganda with videos and so forth to enlarge their numbers and also get money, often using criminal gangs. And that was the first stage. And they've achieved that over the last 20 years. We all know that. They're now in the second stage, which is a stalemate stage. They've got people in power, in politics, in parliament, in local government. They also now have access to armed militia. We saw that, for example, in Southport. If you watch the legacy media, you would only see white people on the streets. But of course, if you watch on X and elsewhere, and also on Talk, obviously, you would see the Muslim militia with their faces covered up and so forth. Yeah. And they're able to have essentially terror attacks in the country. So they're at stage two, very organized. But the great fear is that you're going to have these two groups, you know, the native population who will have elements wanting to fight back against all of this, and the Muslims, and then the British state trying to control the whole thing. I think that's a very realistic prospect for the next 20 years.
It's blimmin' frightening, that's for sure. And things aren't going to be made much easier when the Casey review comes out, which is the review into rape gangs, which is going to directly link illegal migration with the exploitation of white British girls. This is no surprise to the likes of you and I, but it's a different ballpark all of a sudden when we're being given official empirical evidence. We know the government has suppressed things such as statistics on migrant crime by nationality and so forth for, you know, years and years now because they don't want us knowing the truth. Well, this review is going to apparently say, guess what? People have come into this country from other nations where their attitudes towards women are medieval, dangerous and misogynistic, and they are behind the grooming of white working class British girls.
And of course, no one should be surprised by any of this. And if anyone is surprised, they need to, kick up the backside, I would say. It's blatantly obvious. I'm very curious to see how long the legacy media keep that on the front pages, because there'll be every effort and every pressure made to try to bury that story. But it certainly is something which, needs to be dealt with, and you need something like the Casey Review to focus minds and attentions on what we've done to this country. There's this strange idea on the left amongst the liberal elites and so forth, that as soon as you come and set foot upon old Blighty's soil, all of your past attitudes, the 20 or 30 years of culture that you were immersed in, mean nothing at all. It's obviously quite ludicrous. We've imported into this country abhorrent cultural practices. These fester in segregated communities. We know, for example, that Muslims are twice as likely to be extremists if they come from segregated communities. And of course, people who've come particularly from Pakistan and from the Mirpuri region of Pakistan, which is one of the most backward areas of Pakistan. I mean, people may like to know that in Pakistan, many Pakistanis make fun of the type of agrarian Pakistanis over here, who they regard essentially as being rednecks and so forth. And it's those areas which, of course, have a long history of this issue. You asked an hour ago to Peter Blexley why you don't have stories of the rape gangs in London. It's a very clear reason why it doesn't happen. It's because there aren't many white girls left in London of young age. That's I think the real reason you don't see it. You see it happening. But it's not just the rape gangs. Of course, Britain's now the global centre of acid attacks. Honour killings are rife now in this country, unfortunately. Forced marriage, child marriage, cousin marriage. All of these things are going on. They need to be addressed, and I'm afraid our government, as you're saying, they know full well what's going on in this country, and rather than tackle it, whilst they still potentially can, and we're 1 minute to midnight, they will prefer to put their heads in the sand, which will only exacerbate the issue even more.
I mean, would you say, we don't stand alone in Europe, but do you think we're more advanced towards the sort of area where it all disintegrates than other countries? Because I look at what's been going on in France lately, with riots there in Paris and in the city of Dax, which spread across the country. I look at protests happening in Germany. I've been saying to the audience earlier, if you put in any big Western European city followed by anti-immigration protests, Google's probably going to churn you up a news story about where the people are rising up saying we're fed up with what is happening to our societies. How much do all of these things sort of bounce off each other? If something kicks off in a big way in France or kicks off in a big way in Ireland, how much will it be the case of one of them sneezes and we all catch a cold?
Well, this is what happened in 1848. You had a similar sort of connections of revolution happening. These things do have a tendency, if situation gets to the point where you have a critical mass of these issues being faced by multiple countries. But what's fascinating is how much it takes to annoy the English and the British. Because the island has only had mass immigration for a few years. They've already taken to the streets in the Republic of Ireland. We saw that. Northern Ireland has its own, history of violence and being uncomfortable with differences of identity. But in England and France, as we always say, the French are revolting. Here we seem to take things far too placidly. We are the frog in the boiling water in this country. Now, one of the reasons you see a lot of things happening in France is because the French, to their credit, promote a very muscular secularism. You must adopt French ways, ban the burqa and all this sort of thing. So that's why you see more attacks and more hostility that's from radical Muslims in France. In this country, we allow everyone to do what they want. So there's they don't need to take to the streets and do as much as we see in France. So actually, ironically, we're in a worse position in some ways because we've just bent over backwards.
Do you know what I was thinking about this last night, Rafe? And I was thinking about, because I was listening to an interview with Professor David Betts, and I was thinking about how things could manifest going forwards over the next 5 years, 10 years and so forth, because my concern is it's going to be 4 years left of the tenure of this government. Whichever new government gets in, if they want to tackle this problem, that has its own duration as well. It could be 10 years before anything meaningful can actually happen that makes the general public realise this situation is being reversed. And can we hold on for 10 years? What would happen within those 10 years? And it occurred to me, actually, where you've got some of these neighbourhoods, some of these towns, some of these cities, where it is indeed becoming monocultural, but not our culture, at what point we're going to end up with, say, the Muslim community turning around and saying, this is our bit of territory. We want autonomy over it. We want Sharia law here. We demand everybody, dresses in burqas if they're female. We think there should be a curfew of women. But, I just wonder whether they will actually try and sort of territory grab.
Well, of course, that's precisely what's going to happen. We are already retreating into ethno-nationalist silos. We are going to get to the point where we're no longer a united kingdom, but we're a united nations. For example, there's a big immigration crisis in southwest England, in Devon and Cornwall, but it's not from overseas migrants, it's from white people, it's white flight, people fleeing to Cornwall and Devon from London, from Birmingham, from these places, an emptying of the cities, an expansion of the countryside and small towns, and so you're getting segregation within the UK as we speak. And of course, now that once you have the Muslim vote at a certain critical mass, they will be able to have the political clout to begin to demand these things. So it's not just, of course, the story of the reform at the last election getting its MPs. It's obviously of the Muslim vote too. And this, of course, was something that the Labour Party never thought about when they brought in mass immigration. The idea of the Labour Party was to flood this nation with migrants because 80% of ethnic minorities, they thought, and they did, voted Labour. And the idea was, over the decades, you would bring in a population that would guarantee the Labour untouchable majorities. And if you look at places like London and Birmingham, Bradford, it was a policy that worked. But they never thought about the next stage, did they? They never thought about what happens when those groups begin to think for themselves. And that's, I fear, what's going to come down the line. And Labour is so scared of that eventuality that that's why they're coming forward with all of this Islamophobia blasphemy laws, and they are so reluctant to criticise the rape gangs, not having a national inquiry, giving local inquiries to local councils, knowing full well that many of these councils are beholden to the Muslim vote, and of course there's corruption with Muslim postal votes being sent to them with nothing marked on them. That's why it's inherently corrupt, and Labour is so scared of this Muslim vote that it's doing everything it can to placate them.
I mean, we also know that when you've got these sort of balkanised blocs, these sectarian voting blocs, such as the Muslim vote, they can use what's going on overseas as an excuse or a motivation to back them at the ballot box. And then after that, they just essentially represent the Ummah, not so much Gaza anymore. But let's switch our attention now to what is going on in the Middle East and Israel's bombardment or targeted bombardment of Iranian facilities. Iran is striking back. Apparently the IDF headquarters has been targeted. You're a historian. I mean, there's always been a mess in that region. Could this be a tipping point?
Well, historians don't look forward. We try to avoid doing that. But yes, I mean, it's a very, very tense situation. I mean, the area is always a tinderbox waiting to go off. But the point is here, Iran was getting perilously close to having nuclear weapons. And if it does get nuclear weapons, then we're in a very different state, because an Iran with nuclear weapons is very different to North Korea having nuclear weapons, because Iran is the world's only real doomsday cult. People need to understand it's part of the eschatological religion or theology of Shia Islam. Iran is a Shia state, and they believe that the existence of Israel is not only illegitimate, but actually that the destruction of Israel is vital to fulfill Islamic prophecies. And they believe that, of course, that Israel has taken Muslim lands, and if you are a devout believer in Islam, no land can ever be ceded once it's been conquered. That's fundamentally crucial to the fulfillment of their prophecies. And if you want to bring about the Islamic Messiah, the Mahdi, you need to destroy Israel. So you're not even in the area of geopolitics here. You're in an area of religious theology.
Yeah, theopolitics, if you will.
And Israel is fully alert to this and fully wise to it. It's fighting a proxy war on our behalf. And I think those people on the left who are urging Israel to think twice need to fully understand that you cannot actually have these discussions that the West want to have, or negotiations with Iran, over its nuclear development plans. There's a much more fundamental issue at stake here for Iran.
Well, it's like when people bang on about the two-state solution. Oh, the two-state solution. There's a reason why there's not been a two-state solution. Probably because it's impossible. Because whilst there may be people in Israel or Jews who say, fine, we'd be happy for that, I'll bet my bottom dollar you would struggle to find anybody in Gaza who wanted to essentially allow Israel to continue to exist.
Exactly. Well, they all want their 72 virgins. Just a shame no one's told them that all 72 are incels called Norman.
What trans virgins. That's brilliant. I love it. Anyway, Rafe, thank you ever so much. It's always a delight talking to you as Rafe Hadel Manku. If you want to weigh in on the conversation, 03444991000 is the number to call, or indeed to WhatsApp. You can leave me a voice note on that number. 87222 is the number to send a text message to. Remember to write the word talk before you text. Before we go to adverts, let's do a couple of your messages. I've been doing business in Morocco over the last 25 years, and from day one they used to say to me, why do you let the Muslims in Britain get away with being extremist? Because they're not allowed to behave like that in Morocco. I'm a regular visit to Morocco, and you know what? They're so strict on harassment of women that when I went to hang out with my mate Omar, we had to go to the police station and get a certificate that he's allowed to walk down the street with me. Although they do get away with a lot of harassment there still, just saying. But they've banned the burqa, at least. Hi, Alex. Basically, if you can't secure your borders, how do you protect your people? If you can't keep your streets safe, how are you protecting your people? The most highly taxed in living memory, and for what? Very poignant message there from Ian in Liverpool. Dan from Kent says, I used to stand proudly on the D-Day anniversaries and think of the brave young soldiers who grabbed a rifle and boarded the landing crafts in a fight for democracy and freedom of speech. Now I feel utterly ashamed of how we've let them down and let this country dissolve into a hate society. I know you kind of do think, what was it all for when we squandered it? The lives lost, the sacrifices made. We've just squandered it, haven't we? OK, right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, strap yourselves in, because we're going to have a bit of a ding-dong. We're going to have an in-studio head-to-head. That's after this.
Their response couldn't be more different to how you've defined this, Sir Richard. They say Iran could have built 15 nuclear bombs within days.
Well, that's it, as far as anybody commenting like me has ever been aware. And given the history of Israeli misrepresentations, they've been crying wolf about an imminent Iranian nuclear weapon since the 1990s. And Netanyahu has a particular record in this regard.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now you might be lying in bed, you might be having your very first gentle coffee of the day, or your loving partner has brought you up a morning brew. So you can ease yourself gently into the weekend. Now, I have so much sympathy for that, but that's not how we do things around here. Oh no, we like to spice things up, because now it is time for Head to Head.
Head to Head.
Yeah, whose voice is that? Sounds like sort of, you know, old Kermit the Frog's been voiding up. Right, on the right, we've got Jack Barwell, Conservative campaign manager. On the left, we've got Paul Richards, former Labour advisor. Guys, shake hands, make eye contact, say hello.
Nice to be here. Nice to see you,
nice,
Alex.
good. Now get ready for a punch-up, please. Let's start off with the figures, shall we, of channel crossings. 919 migrants crossed just yesterday. 16,183 have arrived since the beginning of 2025. And since Sir Keir Starmer has become Prime Minister, 39,425. Paul, he's not really managing to smash those gangs, is he?
Well, he's starting to, and let's face it, no other government managed it either. So it's, you know, easy for the Tories to say, oh, this is all Labour's fault, but it was happening on their watch just as much and just as loudly. There isn't a single simple answer, Alex. If there was, any government would do it. But you do need to start with the scumbags who are organising the gangs, who are putting those poor souls in the boats in the first place.
Is the problem not that the scumbags who are organising the gangs aren't just people sitting in, you know, basements of Milton Keynes, but they're in Kurdistan, they're in Turkey, they're in Afghanistan, and you can't police all of those
Well, you
countries.
need an intelligence-led, response. So you do need to use the intelligence services. It can't just be down to the gendarme on the beach in Calais. It's got to be down to an international effort to do this. And also you need to do a number of different things, and that includes taking their phones off them, stopping the boats getting anywhere near France in the first place, so disrupting the supply chains, making sure that people are towed back if they're in the shallow waters, puncturing the boats if necessary, you know, all kinds of different public policy tools you have to do. Because if there's one thing we could do, you know, if it was as simple as putting the Royal Navy into the Channel, as people say, or whatever, we would all have done it by now.
Why isn't it that simple, though? I don't understand. Why is it not that simple that we could declare a national emergency? We know there's a security threat of people
coming into the country.
Well, it is a national emergency,
but declaring one doesn't make any difference.
Doesn't that allow you to sort of contravene elements of international law and then be able to do things like turn around and block boats?
In the Act that you're referring to, alas, there is not the provision within that piece of law. Now, you could change the law, possibly, and have that national debate around that. But at the moment, it would have to be, you know, it's a major disruption to the supply chains or food or energy or whatever to be able to call a national emergency.
Therein lies the problem, isn't it, Jack? Because smashing the gangs takes a sort of, you know, multi-dimensional, multinational approach. Everyone's got their own different legislation that they've got to fight against. Many of these custom-made big dinghies are stored in huge warehouses in Germany. Germany, because of their pretty dark past, don't tend to do surveillance, which is why they've been picked as the place to house these dinghies. Is it not the case that if you're sort of putting this down to having to have a sort of multinational approach and you're not doing anything yourself, you're not defending your own realm, then you're reliant on everybody else solving the problem, and it's just not going to get done?
So I think you could both have a multinational approach but also do stronger things in this country. And let me start with saying I actually agree with Paul. I don't think it's grown-up politics for me just to sit here and say because the numbers are going up under Labour that the Tories can claim to be some mythical voice of sense on this issue. The Conservative Party is going through a change because it lost the last election, primarily, or not solely though, in my view, because of its failures on legal migration. Where I'd maybe pick apart what Paul is saying is a couple of things. Firstly, it's not fair to say the numbers are the same as they were under the previous government. They've gone up about 40% in terms of illegal migration crossings, and if we want to have that grown-up conversation, we should admit to that.
But because of the weather, Jack, because of the weather mostly.
There's good weather on and off all the way around. Is it not because the deterrence
There certainly was weather under the previous government. But yes, the deterrent was what I was coming to, Alex. Unless you have a third country processing agreement, and I'm not sitting here and saying that Rwanda worked completely, and I'm not saying that all the answers are on the table, but unless you have some kind of deterrent, people are just going to continue to engage in the process they're already engaging in, because there's no reason for them not to think that they can come to this country and claim asylum and get access to some of the new affordable housing schemes, for example, that Angela Rayner is pushing. So we need to have proper deterrent process. You're right about changing the law, and you're right about things like could we puncture the dinghies, be stronger in pushing back on them. I'm not actually sure the Labour government are doing either of those things. Starmer blocked a lot of the attempts to change the law under the previous government, and that's something I think we should look into, particularly on things like the ECHR. I think it was a document that worked in the 1950s. I'm not sure it works today. And then we need to talk properly about our asylum policy, Alex. So why is it that people who are coming through countries like France are being allowed to claim asylum in this country? If it's based on familial links, do we think that that policy is too lenient at the moment, and are too many people exploiting that and therefore staying in this country? Unless Labour are going to get serious on some of these questions, I don't think they can be claiming to smash the gangs.
Sure, but on the spending review just this week, you know, we had a lot of extra money put into border force, into drones, but also faster processing, because we know that is one of the answers.
But
because people shouldn't be. And we're going to close the asylum hotels.
So okay, look, I want to move on to that in a minute. But the border force and drones, great. But it seems to me when the border force meet these people in the middle of the channel, they just bring them this side. They don't then block them from coming. When it comes to the drone, what's the point of detecting people crossing the channel if you then can't intercept them and turn them back? I don't really understand how the surveillance ties into this process, because it seems to me the Coast Guard get called or border force get called, and they get a sort of escort to the red carpet straight to the hotel, or now the private housing.
You say it's a red carpet. I mean, it stops people from drowning in the channel, which I think we can all agree is a good idea. And the RNLI, have to go out and save people at sea. Which is why when we say smash the gangs, it's more than a slogan. It is about actually stopping anyone getting on a boat in the first place.
If I could make two quick observations. Firstly, on the funding to the border force, we've got to account for inflation, which of course is going up under this Labour government. It's not a real terms funding increase. Secondly, and most importantly, you say that we're going to close the asylum hotels. Where are you putting asylum seekers?
I want to get onto that because
where are they going?
Do you know, Paul? I hate those migrant hotels. It was just such a exorbitant, offensive amount of money to be.
What about the people profiteering it as well?
Well, I agree.
I would tax them to the hill.
Oh.
I would sequestrate all that cash they made, driving around in expensive cars.
Totally
profiting from misery.
I totally agree. But personally, I don't think the solution either is to put people in multi-occupancy residences in some of the poorest, most deprived communities of the UK. And I say that as a woman who lives by herself. If I happened to live on a street and next door ended up being, 5 men from Iran, Afghan and Syria who didn't have, professions or jobs, who'd come to this country illegally, who are Lord knows what they're doing day in, day out, who have very funny attitudes towards women, I would despise it. I'd move. So is that the solution? Shutting the hotels, but then you put them, into just housing? We don't have enough housing.
Well, I think there's an argument for building some sort of centres in the, within the UK where people can be housed. But the thing I would do, and the government doesn't want to do this, is let them work. I would put them into work gangs. I'd give them some sort of daily allowance, and I'd put them into proper activities, whether it's cleaning up canals or sorting out the graffiti or whatever it might be. Because if you're working, you're active. You're not hanging around. I live near these hotels, or did, before they moved on the south coast of England, and they're just young men standing about, smoking, chatting, doing nothing, day after day. Now that's terrible misuse of people's time, but it's also threatening to the community.
I'm interested in this one, Jack, because I've often said quite the same as Paul, which is people say, well, if you give them jobs, it's going to act as a draw. I think if they land in Britain and are told, right, here's your bunk bed on a farm, you're now picking fruit for the next 6 weeks, I don't think people would think that was a great idea. I think they'd much rather sit around in a hotel and have, PlayStations and be given driving lessons than actually have to roll up their sleeves and toil on behalf of this nation.
Yeah, completely agree. And I agree with both of you on this. I think we've also got to make sure that the type of job they're doing is right. We know that a lot of these people are young men. We need to make sure that they're working in environments that would be safe for them to do so. And you made that point about safety, and particularly for women living on their own, Alex, a really important point that gets lost in the immigration debate, I think. But if we can find the right jobs for them, and if it's going to be more of a cost-saving measure...
Why are we shipping Latvians and Estonians as seasonal workers because they're strapping young men who don't mind doing a bit of toil in the sunshine for some good cash money? Why are we bringing those people in when you've got a load of men sitting around in hotels?
Completely.
There's a danger of consensus breaking out here, isn't there?
But why is that not done?
Well, because the argument against it, for the sake of the argument, is that it then actually becomes an incentive. People think they can walk straight into a job. That's the government's argument against this. But I think that's the wrong argument. I think people are working, a bit of pride, they can earn a bit of money, they can spend that in the local shops and become part of a community, and also do something useful in society.
I'd be a bit strict in that. I'm not saying let's go full chain gang and make it inhumane, but I think it should be more on the grounds
of a
securely run sort of,
But again, of course, the biggest thing, if you're talking about getting these people out of dangerous places and off the streets, is of course to have that third country processing that we talked about. If I could ask Paul one question, it's very interesting as he was saying that, he was talking about the young men that are in these asylum hotels. Are you disappointed to hear Darren Jones misanalyse this on Question Time the other night and give an incorrect stat about women?
I don't think it's misanalyse, I'd call it gaslighting.
I was trying to be nice, Alex, but of course that's right. Would you say that he's spoken correctly then?
I am a great fan of Darren Jones, and it's very rare for him to misspeak, but I think on this one he hadn't looked at the data from the Home Office, which suggests the opposite of what he said.
I'd like to hear that.
Yeah.
Before we go to advert break, someone has just written something very interesting on messages, which themes in with what we're talking about, so it's worth reading out. It's Stu in Hales Owen, who says, referencing the migrant hotels, Angela Rayner makes it not illegal to be homeless, and Rachel Reeves says they're going to free up hotels. I wonder where all the illegals will go. interesting because we've seen what happens in countries like Ireland, seen it happen across America where you've got these tent cities. Now, people might have thought it's an outdated draconian law that essentially being homeless is illegal, but is this not opening up the risk of tents popping up down Oxford Street?
And I hate those tent cities. You know, I'm in and around London seeing them all over the parks and elsewhere. So it's not about that, because the trespass laws are going to be beefed up, so you can't just start a tent city anywhere you fancy it. Plus there's going to be greater intervention on things like organised begging, so the gangs that organise the begging gangs, you know, every sort of 50 yards up a high street, that's going to be cracked down on too. So it's a bit of a misnomer to say, oh, we're legalising homelessness. That's not what this is about. It's about interventions that actually work. The 1824 Vagrancy Act obviously isn't working, so let's just get rid of it and put something better in place.
Well, they'll be in a whole world of trouble if those tent cities pop up, won't they?
They will, and they'll be also in a whole lot of trouble, of course, if all the new houses that Angela Rayner is promising go to people coming from foreign countries. Labour are promising 300,000 houses per year over their 1.5 million in 5 years, but of course they're bringing more than 300,000 people into the country each year. So are the new people that are coming into this country going to be left without a house, or is it once again going to be British people on the backbone under a Labour government?
A great question. It's going to have to be a rhetorical one, because we're going to advert break now, but when we come back after the break, a man who often divides opinion, Mr Boris Johnson, has written a big piece today in the Mail, essentially saying Starmer is the most abject and craven British government of the past 100 years. They're so weak, they make Neville Chamberlain look positively robust. Pot kettle any? Right, we're going to be discussing that, or debating that rather, after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
My lovely big boss producer man Dean has ordered me the best breakfast that a girl could have at this hour of day. And I'm sitting here and the advert starts and I manage to have about 2 tiny little mouthfuls, and then the jingle comes on and I'm like, great, that's it. It's going to take me at this rate until the end of the show to even eat a fried egg. It's going cold already. If only we just, if it was sort of, you know, protocol to sit there and film my face while actually presenting, I'd do it quite happily, because I can manage to eat bacon far better than Ed Miliband. Right, now, talking about ghosts of party leaders past, here's one. Boris Johnson's popped up again. He's been sort of quiet, hasn't he? But he's knocking around all over the place at the moment, which makes me worried that he's on manoeuvres. And I use the word worried because, you know, he's there banging on how Starmer's leading the most abject and craven British government of the past 100 years. They're so weak, blah, 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 blah. And yet when I think of Boris Johnson, I think of him as fun, a man who can chuck about a bit of ancient Greek and make some interesting sort of, you know, classical references and makes us all laugh with his tall tales and his inimitable presentation style. But I also think of a man who changed the rules, which saw the mass influx of legal migration into this country. I also see the man who bound us up to so many international treaties, wanting to go bigger, harder, faster than any other country on earth in net zero. And I think to myself, Boris, mate, you were part of the problem. What do you think about that, Jack?
I think, and actually I think Conservatives have been quite honest about this, that Boris did make a number of decisions that actually didn't help either the Conservative cause or the country's cause. Now, he could also have done some correct decisions. There were things about ordering the vaccine, there were things about trying to deliver Brexit, where I think that Boris did a good job, and the initial plan about investment into the Red Wall, we could have followed through better on some of the later spending reviews on that. But the biggest thing I would say to you, Alex, is it's 2 things in politics can always be possible at the same time, and a lot of people forget this. It could be simultaneously possible that Boris made mistakes as Prime Minister, and B, that Keir Starmer is the most incompetent Prime Minister of the 21st century,
but what we're looking at
seems
here,
undeniable
when
to
we
me.
look at the destruction of the Conservative Party, they didn't help themselves by changing leader every 5 seconds in some strange sort of, you know, junior common room version of the political musical chairs. But a lot of the mess that the public are so furious about now, energy bills, net zero, mass migration, that was done at Boris Johnson's pen.
Yes, but again, my point to you, on all three of the things you've just said, the situation is worse now under Keir Starmer than it was under Boris Johnson. So it can simultaneously be possible that Boris made mistakes, and B, that if we look at today's spending review, if we look at where energy bills are now, remember Labour said they were going to come down, they've actually gone up. Illegal migration, they said would come down, it's gone up. The rate of debt, they said would go down, it's gone up, compared to where we were, not just under the last Conservatives, but under Boris Johnson. So yes, Boris is not perfect. I don't think any Prime Minister has probably been perfect in the 21st century. A lot of us on the right wish we could have Mrs.
If only we could
back.
bring back Disraeli.
Yes. Well, actually, Disraeli is my favourite Prime Minister, so I wish we could, Alex. But in the real world, where Disraeli is unfortunately dead for quite a while, we have to accept that politicians aren't perfect. But the question in his article is Keir Starmer about the worst Prime Minister we've seen? And my view is yes.
Where do you stand on this, Paul? Do you think your man's doing a good job? Do you wish it was someone else?
Yes and no is my answer to both those questions. So I think he is doing a good job with the hand he's been dealt. It's a very difficult economic situation, but he's making these big investment decisions. I think it was right to boost defence expenditure, for example. I like the decision on Sizewell C this week, so we're getting more nuclear energy, bringing the bills down, more police on the streets. All these things I think are putting the country in the right direction. Boris is pretty much the last person on God's earth who should be lecturing the rest of us on how to be Prime Minister. The true scale of the PPE scandal is still to come out on his watch, where these fast-track contracts went to mates of the government. That's going to be a massive public outcry once people realise how much of their money was siphoned off and wasted. And we are also reaping the whirlwind of the mass migration that happened on his watch, the Boris surge of people coming to this country post-Brexit. And that is, undeniably something happened on the Conservatives' watch. Just one more thing, though. I think the sort of dislocation of the citizen from trusting their politicians are starting to happen on his watch too, with all these parties during COVID in Downing Street. And I think that starts to, the rot starts to set in there, because people think, well, if you're doing this, why are we being punished for doing something that we're told we're not allowed to do?
I love the fact you've set me up a nice little segue there for what I wanted to bring up now, which is, you talked about COVID, you talked about the deleterious effect on public trust of government during COVID, and you referenced the parties. Now I'd reference something else, which is something in the Telegraph today, where it transpires that representatives from DCMS, the Departure of Culture, Media and Sport, went and spoke to TV execs and said, right, we need you to help us. Message to the nation. We saw, a sort of interesting bit from EastEnders where they all discussed having the vaccine, and some said, I think it's been developed a bit quickly. And says, you're not one of those anti-vaxxers, are you? And this sense now, we've seen it especially when it comes to the control of social media during COVID, and the whole world saw this. But this sense, actually, that yes, the government might have been trying its best under very tough, unprecedented circumstances, but there was this, the nudge unit was a nudge unit on steroids, and people feel like that potentially was the public being coerced and lied to and forced to doing things that they didn't want to do.
Good. We needed to get the vaccines out, and we needed to nail all the myths around them, and if you can use popular culture to do that. What do you think the Archers is? The Archers has been on the radio for 100 years now.
But is it not?
To educate farming communities about, what MAF wanted them to do back in the day.
These days the Archers educates farmers' communities about trans rights, but there you are.
I'm actually going to disagree with Paul there, and actually this was something that happened under Conservatives. I do think there is a strong case for the press not being influenced by the government. I also think there's a strong case for the press to push multiple different angles. I know a lot of young people like me got interested in politics during the COVID pandemic and felt that at times the government was pushing a particular narrative. Now, it may well be, Paul, that the narrative on some of those things, I agree with you completely on the vaccines, by the way, was the right narrative. On other things, like the constant lockdown of schools, which hugely hampered my generation who did A-levels without actually being able to sit the exams, that was the wrong answer. But if I may go back to the previous question, Paul did a great job of spending 5% of his time answering your initial question about Keir Starmer, and then 95% attacking the previous Conservative government.
Thanks.
Labour are very good at that, and Labour, of course, have found this out since they've come into government. It's one thing to snipe from the sidelines in opposition, a very different one to defend the decisions you're taking. Let's look at some of the things that Starmer did on the spending review, which is part of what Johnson's criticising. Now, Paul says more spending on defence. That's great. But, of course, defence is, after health, the second biggest thing that Rachel Reeves is claiming in future years. And this is really important,
So we spend less on defence than we do on paying interest on the national debt.
So exactly. And debt, of course, has gone not down but up under this Labour government, even though they claim now that the economy is better and therefore they can afford the winter fuel payment reinstatement, which, of course, we know they're only doing for political reasons. The defence point is important. Rachel Reeves is spending more on the NHS and defence, and she's claiming she can pay for it because she's going to cut the funding in future years on, wait for it, the NHS and defence, they're the number 2 top things she's claiming she's going to cut. It's complete mythical economics. She's kicking the can down the road so she can get out of it and put more taxes up in a few years' time and hope the public are back on her side. We've got to call her out for it, and I don't think just blaming the previous Conservative government is a good enough answer to the economic situation.
I wasn't expecting to go down the economic route. Thank you, Jack, for becoming the new editor-in-chief of my show. But anyway, as we did it, Paul, I'd have great sympathy of anybody who becomes Chancellor, because we've got such a high level of national debt, which will again be at the whim of, say, if, for instance, whatever activities going on between Israel and Iran right now, if that has the effect of inflating global oil prices or the prices of cargo through the Strait of Hormuz, etc., that has a huge inflationary effect on the global economy. It means that when you're trying to service that debt, you're paying even more money. But might there be an argument, actually, knowing that they came in and said, oh, we've got a 20 billion black hole and all the rest of it, that they went on a bit of a spending spree before they had really thought, OK, what should be our priorities? And I'm thinking about public sector pay increases. I'm thinking about setting up GB Energy. I'm thinking about, you know, creating all these different quasi-quangos as well, which cost money and human resource. So would it not have been better to sit there and go, right, these are the things we've actually critically got to spend on before we can bring in our pet projects?
Well, there's no harm in spending on NHS wages, because they've been chronically underfunded and people in the NHS do a great job. And don't forget, if you increase somebody's wages, whether it's a train driver or a nurse, they then spend that money in the community, in the private sector. So it's one way you get growth in the economy. On debt, you have to have growth in the economy to pay down the debt. And some of the investments announced this week on capital expenditure, power stations, roads, defence expenditure, these things will then, in the medium to long term, help the economy grow from the flatlining it's had for the last 10 years. So you do need to have that long-term investment. Now, the danger in politics is, of course, you take the decision now, it doesn't pay off for 10 years.
And then you're out of government and you don't get credited
and
for it.
Someone else takes the credit. But these are the right decisions. But the big one is rearmament. And this is the animating force behind the government now, is because America are an unreliable ally, and, you know, happy birthday to Donald Trump, but he's decided to vacate the space. Russia, Iran, China, increasingly belligerent and dangerous to our safety here in the UK. We have to rearm. I think we should double the size of the army. We need to get more young people into the forces.
It would help, wouldn't it, with all the youth unemployment we got, young people who sort of post-industrial worlds with nothing to do.
Quite, and you can't have AI doing those jobs. You need soldiers, and I think also it's a fantastically good way to get social mobility. You know, working class kids into the army can learn trades, and they learn discipline, but also responsibility, and they become better citizens when they leave. You know, so this is now what this government's all about, is getting rearmament front and centre. We've cut the aid budget, for God's sake. You know, Labour people hate that. We love international aid, but we've cut that budget.
Because to spend it on those migrant hotels, aren't we, Paul?
We've cut that budget to put into the armed forces.
We've bought the Third World here. We don't have to spend the money in the Third World. We just ship them here instead.
And a lot of jobs in the supply chain too. So, you know, if you invest in defence, it helps in the Red Wall and everywhere else.
Hugely agree with that.
Rearmament, I completely agree. We're on the same page about that. Your point about doubling the size of the army, I'd love to do it. I don't know where the funding's come from. We're at risk of here what I call Lib Dem syndrome, which is just promising things without actually having a way to pay for them. The Lib Dems are the kings of that. But I completely agree on the rearmament, and there's no debate between us on that issue. There is a huge debate between us on what you just said about the public versus the private sector. Now, I have tremendous support for NHS workers, train drivers, people that work in the public sector.
You didn't show it in government, though, did you? I mean, there was, you know, flatlining wages in those sectors.
What we did was we accepted that just spending extra money without being able to pay for it is not a good idea, and Labour found that out, and New Labour, and they're finding it out again today. I completely disagree on how you grow the economy, though. You grow the economy by supporting the private sector, because people in the private business will employ extra people, and they have to keep to fiscal deadlines, unlike the government that just splurge and spend more, and that's how we get the debt. Alex, very quickly, the Labour government, every economic decision they've taken has hampered private business, whether it's family farms, whether it's self-businessmen, whether it's business rate tax increases, whether it's national insurance, and everything they've done has supported extra spending on the public sector, putting up wages, which hasn't generated growth. That's why in the last month, growth, of course, is down 0.3%. Rachel Reeves claimed we need an emergency budget under the previous Conservative government when it went down by 0.1%. So can we have 3 emergency budgets, please, to account for the fact that it's gone down 0.3% in the last month?
You yourself have just said, you know, what you say in opposition and what you say in government are different. And obviously what you say in government is different now that you're running. When the books are opened, you discover
I agree that, like, Liz Truss and the minute budget was a disaster.
Do all of those
I'm being honest about the Conservative mistakes. You should be honest about Labour's ones.
On investment, you know, if you invest in the massive number of homes that we're going to need Street, for example. That's state investment, but it is private sector companies that are going to build that housing, and it's people in the private sector who are going to get the jobs in the supply chain, and it's got all the suppliers that will benefit. So you do need state intervention, but it then boosts the private sector, which of course is the place where growth happens, right?
Well, wouldn't it be great to see some growth anywhere? Private, public sector, who cares? Let's just see some growth. Anyway, guys, thank you ever so much. Thank you to Paul, thank you to Jack. Well, we had some agreement, we had some fallouts, but we had fun at the end of the day. That was very important. OK, we're going to be taking a short break now. After the break, it's your opportunity to have some fun. That's right. I'd like to speak to you. What do you think about any of the things we've been talking about? 0344499 1000 is the number to dial if you want to be patched through to the studio. If you want to send me a WhatsApp, it is the same number. You can also leave me a voice note on WhatsApp for me to play out on air. 87222 is the number to send me a text message. You've got to write the word talk before you text. No, it's not a safety warning. It's just so it pings the masts on top of talk towers and wends its way down into the little Cape Canaveral setup I have in front of me. We're on X at talkTV, and I'm back just after this.
Their response couldn't be more different to how you've defined this, Sir Richard. They say Iran could have built 15 nuclear bombs within days.
Well, that's it, as far as anybody commenting like me has ever been aware. And given the history of Israeli misrepresentations, they've been crying wolf about an imminent Iranian nuclear weapon since the 1990s. And Netanyahu has a particular record in this regard.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome Welcome back. Right, it's time to hit up the phone lines. First of all, let's do a few messages. Me again, says Colin. It was Starmer who, as a young lawyer, defended migrants' rights to get benefits. The floodgates will be open for every Tom, Dick and Harry now. Those people who voted Labour should hold their heads in shame. And also Gary said, how dare your guest say that Darren Jones misspoke? This is after the Labour MP, who's an Undersecretary in the Treasury, said on Question Time that everyone on those boats coming over the channel, women and children. He says this is a government that thinks that if it says things often enough, the public will believe that they are true. The £22 billion non-existent black hole, fixing the broken economy that wasn't broken, putting more money in our pockets whilst our bills soar, or the delusion that their plan to bring an end to the illegal boat crossings is working when they are coming in record numbers. They're all lies, and they think we're stupid enough to accept them as facts. Oh, we call it spin in the business. Let's speak now to Steve, who's in Leeds. Hello there, Steve.
Good morning, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm good. I'm grand. How are you doing?
I'm good, well, thank you. I was just listening to Paul on your panel there, and I think, without wanting to be rude to the guy, he's a bit numerically illiterate. The idea that public sector pay rises generate growth in the economy is ridiculous because it's circular money.
Yeah.
I work in the private sector, so the tax I pay is new money, new tax. Now, if the government wanted to save money, what it should do is make all public sector workers net pay. No tax, no national insurance. Just keep it in the first place. Because the HMRC spend billions every year trying to claim back the money, the taxpayers' money that we give them, to claim it back again. Why don't we just look?
Yeah, it does seem mad.
In the public sector, it's net pay.
Our tax system's mental, though, as well, isn't it? I mean, I agree what you mean. If you're paying someone out of the Treasury and then asking for that money back, you could save a step, couldn't you, by saying you're not going to be paying any tax whatsoever, but this is going to be your monthly amount. But if you're in the private sector, my God, our taxation rule books are insane. I should know. I'm in the private sector. I get caught up in IR35. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, the tax system in the UK. It just needs to be simplified, doesn't it?
Well, think, Alex, we've just done it with the pensions, fuel allowance. We're going to pay people £300 who don't deserve it to claim it back again. Why don't we just say if you earn over 35,000, you can't have it? We're going to pay civil servants to spend hours claiming stuff back. There'll be people that don't realise they've got it when they shouldn't have had it. Then they'll be taking them to court and fining them for having this 300 quid that they didn't know they should have had. And it's just an absolute money fest for HMRC, because it's a £1,000 fine if you fill in your tax return wrong, which is a 500-page document that bloody Einstein couldn't have even put together.
Yeah.
And then we spend and we go, oh, we're going to pay everybody the winter fuel allowance, but some of them are going to have to give it back again. Why don't you just not pay them?
It's just they do seem to overcomplicate absolutely everything. I couldn't agree more. Steve in Leeds, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's do some more messages now. Nick in Devon, Alex Phillips. Oh, you're amazing. Thanks, Nick. You speak for so many people. Please continue. Go back into politics and help us all. Many thanks to all of you on Talk. You give me hope. Yeah, politics. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Let's see. Here's a good idea. Get the migrants out of the hotels and let all these leftists and do-gooders protesting for them take them in, says Jason. Well, do you know what? Perhaps the government, it set up all of that. Would you help out in your community during COVID, didn't it? You had those, what were they called now? You had all those little alerts that came on your phone. This person needs some shopping. Can you do this? Can you do that? Perhaps they should contact people on these marches and say, do you have a spare room? Would you take old Mohammed from Syria? Oh, you would you? Brilliant, yay. Oh, you wouldn't? Well, perhaps you should put down your placard and go back to work. Good morning, Alex, says Trevor in Stevenage. If we told the French fishermen that they can't fish in our waters until they stop the migrant boats, how soon do you think the boats would stop? We don't, I mean, we so the French will bring in fish into anything. They love it. And I can't believe, I laugh, but it's heartbreaking, that negotiation where Sir Keir Starmer said, we're only going to extend your rights to fish in British waters by 4 years. And the EU said, no, 5 years. No, we're only going to give you 4 more years. That's it. And then we'll review it again. No, but we want 5 years, Sir Keir. Oh, OK, then. 12 years it is. You just think, what is wrong with you? You absolute numbskull. How did you end up giving away one of the only negotiating cards we've really got? Dan from Kent says, spot on, caller Steve. There you go, Steve. You've been popular this morning already. A statement for your panel, says Tim. Defence spending is great if you have an army, but 1,000 are leaving a month. I mean, that's the other thing. Who wants to be in the armed forces these days if you're not looked after as a veteran? I wish that our armed forces were trained well, equipped well, paid well, because they're so important. You never know when the proverbial's going to hit the fan, and believe you me, you don't want to be caught wanting. Dell says, ha ha ha, Labour are worried about our safety, but they let a small army enter the UK and even pick them up on a daily basis. Well, exactly. Make it make sense. It should all be so much easier, and I can never fully understand why it's not. Alex says, Dave, it would be nice if any of the politicians would spend more time concentrating on answering the questions of the people instead of slagging off the other parties. They're all as bad as each other. Well, that's the problem with the two sort of legacy parties, and the first past the post pass responsibility backwards and forwards, and then they end up just doing exactly the same thing as one another. It is a pantomime and it is a farce. Now, someone who might have something to say about that and have strong opinions on all the topics we've been talking about so far today is the leader of Reform UK, Mr. Nigel Farage. He will be joining me after this advert break. He has given a warning that he predicts mass social unrest if we don't crack down on mass migration. Is he right? I've got lots of questions to ask him. He's coming up on the other side of these commercials, so put on the kettle, make a brew, and I'll see you just after this.
We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently are going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I'll do, mate, I'll shove a £5 in a pot and you can go and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it a channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back, or welcome if you've only just climbed aboard HMS Common Sense here at Talk. It's been a very interesting first 3 hours. Time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it? We've got one more hour to go, so let's turn up the volume, turn up the heat, and really get down into the nitty-gritty gnarliness of UK politics. Because if there's one thing that caught my eye in today's papers, it was an exclusive interview with the son of Reform UK leader, Mr. Nigel Farage MP. He went to the very first Reform pub. Apparently we'll be talking about that as well. But in this interview, he made it very plain that he is worried about not just community cohesion, but the real risk of societal unrest if mass migration and a lack of integration continues as it is. Who better to ask for their opinion on this than the man himself? It is Nigel Farage MP, MP for Clacton, of course. Good morning to you, Nigel.
Good morning.
Now, reading your article, I very much share your sense of concern. There's a leading war professor called Professor David Betts at King's College London who actually predicts that within the next 5 years there's a significant chance of the UK having some sort of a civil war, or even other countries in Europe, and this spreading across the West. My question to you is, we're very worried, both of us, it seems, about societal unrest. We've got 4 more years of a Labour government. How long can the bung hold?
Well, the Labour government don't even understand it. We saw the Treasury Minister, Darren Jones, on BBC's Question Time on Thursday night. And when the question of the small boats crossing the English Channel came up, and by the way, we're waiting for figures from yesterday, but I'm told it will be over 900. 919 it was. 919, right? You're ahead of me. Well, I wasn't far out though, was I?
Well predicted.
And you know, he said, "Oh well, of course they're mostly children, babies, and women." I mean, you know, whether he is just an idiot or willfully lying or both, I haven't worked out. But it shows you the total lack of understanding of the problem. Huge numbers of young males, undocumented young males, coming into Britain, most of them coming from countries in which, let's be frank, women aren't even treated as second-class citizens. They're treated far worse than that. You know, that is a massive cultural problem.
we have seen what's happened in Ballymena as a result of a young 14-year-old schoolgirl with the alleged attempt to orally rape her by 2, we suspect, young Romanian men. We suspect that because at the court hearing, the preliminary court hearing, they needed Romanian translators. So I think you put 2 and 2 together. We have seen recently the conviction, finally, of yet another grooming gang in Rochdale. We know that there are going to be, over the next 4 years and going forward, more and more incidents where the general public are getting very angry at crimes being perpetrated at the hands of foreign men. My question to you was, you're very worried about social unrest. What is the time frame on this? Because we've got 4 more years left of Labour. If you do lead the next government, one assumes that you're going to need 1 term to dismantle the Gordian knot of legislation, the straitjacket of case precedent and human rights laws that prevents deportations to happen at a pace. So are we looking at 10 years before we can start to change things around? And can the public last that long?
No. I mean, you know, the precedent has been set by a man called Tony Abbott. He was the Prime Minister of Australia. They had a very similar problem to us. The boats were coming from Indonesia. Now, it was a longer distance. They were bigger boats with more people on them, but the principle was exactly the same. Government after government grappled with the problem, failed. And in the end, Tony passed a law that said that nobody that comes via this route will ever be allowed to claim refugee status, will ever be allowed to stay in Australia, will ever be allowed to access the benefit system. He started with that, and then he literally towed the boats back to Indonesia. The world was in outrage. You can imagine the human rights lawyers, the UN, the EU, the British Foreign Office. But a funny thing happened. Within 2 weeks, the boats stopped coming. And people will not pay traffickers. They will not pay traffickers if they know that coming to Britain, they will not be able to work, they will not get permanent leave to remain, they will not be able to claim benefits, and if they're caught, you know, working illegally, they'll be deported the next day. They're the things you have to do to stop the boats. And we can go on about the French. I mean, it's extraordinary that we've given them 800 million now since 2014. And looking at Rachel Reeves's statement during the week, there's hundreds more millions going to the French. We can blame the French all we want. It's our fault. It's our problem. We are the soft touch.
But we still have a problem. Even if we manage to start intercepting and stopping the boats, we've still got a problem of people who've come here illegally already, very likely, no doubt, to be granted asylum in our ridiculous system, soon to be dispersed in multiple occupancy residences around the country. And even if you just look at people who are here anyway, people who've been born in this country, perhaps, people who might be 3rd or 4th generation immigrants, you have balkanised communities who don't share our values, who don't speak our language. In fact, fact, they're more often than not the ones who are forming rape gangs, not people who got off a boat yesterday. So how do we tackle that particular issue? The general public are as worried about that as they are about the boats. And it seems to me that you're going to have to put forward a very radical slate of policies to even begin to touch the sides. Have you got the courage and the conviction to do that?
Well, you're right. And I mean, look, massive announcement this week from Rachel Reeves, $39 billion over the next few years to go into social housing projects. Who are those social houses for? Because in London, 70% of social housing has gone to foreign-born people. So we have to have a radical change of entitlements, who is able to access the benefit system. But you're right about the existing problem, and that takes us neatly back to Ballymena. Now, I spoke yesterday to the Member of Parliament for Ballymena. I spoke to his neighbouring constituency in that same county of Antrim, and both those MPs told me the same thing, that a group of the Roma community were put into that neighbourhood. There were all sorts of antisocial behaviour. Both of them told me that sheep were being stolen from local farms and cooked in the back garden. There were old mattresses lying out the front of the house. There were girls being followed. I mean, the community had been complaining to their politicians, had been complaining to the police, had been complaining to social services, and just felt they were being totally ignored, that the area was going down, property prices were falling very, very sharply. And look, no one supports the thuggery of setting fire to buildings, even a community centre. But you need to understand what was boiling up, what was bubbling away for some time to come. And all Starmer can do, all our Prime Minister can do, is to condemn far-right thugs. I don't think this Labour government, whether it's that Darren Jones idiot on Question Time, whether it's our Islington-based human rights lawyer, knighted Prime Minister, I don't think these people even understand the scale of the problem, frustration, and can I say even fear that is out there in the communities. And I think the big issue, the really big issue, and the thing that sparked Ballymena was sexual behaviour towards women in this country by men who come from a completely different culture. And I think that is the thing, above all, that really worries me.
It's a hugely worrying thing. I've been banging on about it for a long time. But my concern is this. You have communities in the UK that are already balkanised. You've got communities where there's 70-80% of the population are Muslim, where they actually have Sharia courts operating, albeit under the radar, where they're encouraging women to wear burqas, where they don't speak the language, where they marry people off at the age of 9, where they think cousin marriage is fine. And my concern here is these aren't people necessarily who arrived yesterday. They're people who are here, who are legally entitled to be here. Their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents might have been the ones to come over here. How do we deal with a problem like that? Because it seems to me that what's going to happen going forwards is we're going to increasingly see voting blocks based upon sectarian politics. We're going to see Muslim MPs coming forward and saying they represent the Ummah and their policies are only for Muslims, which is flies in the face of integration. What on earth can we do about those communities?
Well, you're right. In Lancashire the other day, I think you mentioned the Reform pub in Blackpool in your intro, but I was with a group of Lancashire County councillors on Thursday, and can you believe there was an independent councillor elected from a Lancashire town on May the 1st, and the manifesto of that candidate was for the separation of men and women in public life. That candidate was elected and is now on Lancashire County Council. We have MPs in the House of Commons, elected purely on the issue of Gaza and their dislike or perhaps even loathing and hatred of Israel. So, yeah, this is now very, very deep within our communities. And a lot of people who are of these opinions, as you say, are British-born and hold British passports. So we have got one hell of a problem. And I'm not going to, say to you on this interview that I can solve this overnight. I can't. But we have to have much more robust, much stronger attempts at integration. And I think one of the key things here must be we need to develop an intolerance around language. We really do need to say that if you're in this country living off UK benefits, you've got to speak our language. That would at least be a start.
It'll at least be a start. Let's talk now about the French and talking about having intolerance and treating things robustly. The French are taking the proverbial, aren't they? Almost €1 million. It might be over, 1 billion, sorry, been given to the French in various tranches over the years. And they don't even like getting their Chanel loafers wet, do they?
Well, I mean, I was the one that exposed this 5 years ago. I exposed 5 years ago that as soon as a dinghy leaves the beach, they are literally escorted by a French warship all the way to a 12-mile line from the Kent or East Sussex coast, at which the lifeboats or border force taxi them into Dover, and once they're in, they're in. Look, I think, recent photographs that we've seen of French police on the beach sort of virtually waving off the boats have annoyed people. There has been a change of tactics over the last 2 days. Tear gas was fired yesterday. There were attempts to get people out of the water, but it doesn't matter, and here's why. Those boats launch from, if you go right out to the east, a place called Gravelines, which is very close to the Belgian border. But they've even launched boats as far west as a town called Burke. That is 100 miles of potential launch sites from the French coast. They have tens of thousands of acres of woods, of sand dunes. It's a much less populated country, of course, than the south coast, of England. And I mean, even if you had 10,000 French soldiers stopping the boats, you still would have boats leaving. You will not stop this problem. All the while, those that pay the traffickers know that if they set foot on British soil, they'll be able to stay for the rest of their lives, either working illegally in the black economy or just living off benefits. This is our problem. Yet fine, we can be annoyed at the French, but actually it's our problem. We are the ones that are allowing this to happen. It's the weakness of British politicians, and I think the repeated promises, I know David Cameron, Theresa May, the list goes through, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, all of them saying, we will stop the boats, we will stop this, Starmer smash the gangs. None of them have the will, none of them have the guts, none of them have the courage to genuinely confront this problem. And Alex, I was the person, almost just over 5 years ago, I was the person going out into the English Channel, filming the boats. I then filmed the first migrant hotel. I warned everybody 5 years ago that if you allowed people who come to stay, that it would lead to an invasion. And I was absolutely berated for daring to use that word. But 150,000 people later, nearly all of them young men from different cultures, many indeed coming from war zones in which they were fighting. I was right about this. And if the British public can put their trust in anybody to have the courage to deal with this problem, then I genuinely believe it has to be me.
Are you worried, though, that if it is indeed you and you become Prime Minister, that as soon as you get into number 10, you realise that the path that you can tread is so narrow? Because you've got the civil service on one side being intransigent, you've got the leftist lawyers on the other side, trying to take everything back to the courts. You're going to have restraints put on you potentially by the international community, good old international law. Are you worried that actually, when you're potentially sitting in number 10 Downing Street and say, I'm going to tackle this problem, that you find that you're in the same straitjacket as all the other Prime Ministers have been?
If we have the country behind us, and if we have a parliamentary majority, we have the legitimacy to do what we've promised the British people. And if that means we have fights with the civil service, if that means we have to sack people, if that means that a Lord Chancellor and an Attorney General decide that some of the judges we've got are unsuitable, if that's what it comes to, then that's what has to be done. Because if we don't deal with this, the continuing incoming problem, and as you rightly pointed out, the existing problem, then I am deeply fearful for the future of this country, the integrity of our communities, the safety of women on our streets, and frankly, everything about our civilization. This fight, if not fought and won, that I shudder to think what this country will look like in a few years' time.
Wow. Now let's try and end on a positive note, shall we, rather than sort of the dystopian doom speaking, which I fully agree with, can I just say. But thank goodness in the world there is now a Reform UK pub, and you happened to go to it yesterday. Tell us more.
Yeah, so this was in Blackpool, and this had been a Conservative club for 99 years. It dropped its Conservative association a few years ago and just became the Talbot pub. But it is now the Reform Talbot pub, and their best-selling beer, and I did manage to pour a pint of it myself, is called Remainers' Tears. How about that? And I think, and I hope and believe, it'll be the first of many Reform pubs and clubs around the country. And it was so interesting going in there and meeting people, you know, ex-Labour, ex-Conservative, ex-Armed Forces, people who'd never voted in their lives. But whilst, yes, you're right, Alex, we're deeply fearful about the future, there's something else happening that is pushing the surge of reform that you've seen over the last year, and particularly the last few months. Actually, it's optimism. It's a belief that with the right will, we can do something about it.
If any little nation's going to be able to lead the way in the West and show people how to get back to greatness, surely it is the United Kingdom. Nigel, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme and giving us all of that time. It's been a fascinating conversation. That was, of course, inimitable Mr. Nigel Farage. Right, have you got any thoughts on what he had to say? Kevin's message, Kevin in Southampton, saying, every time I hear Mr. Farage talk, I get hope that maybe, just maybe, the future won't be bad as now and the next 4 years. We've already been invaded, says Ryan. Well, I think I noticed that much. OK, there you go. If you want to throw in your 2-bit, please do. The number to dial 03444991000. That is charged at your normal network rate. What did you think about what Nigel has to say? Has he got the right programme? Can he do it? Or will he find himself, if he does become Prime Minister, trapped in the same laborious behemoth of a bureaucratic system as other Prime Ministers claim that they're up against? Or do you think if any man can take on the establishment, it is he? Will you be voting for him? You can send me a WhatsApp as well, or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp 03444991000. 8722 is the number to send me a text message. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you send your text. And we're on X at talkTV. I can't wait to hear from you guys after this.
Their response couldn't be more different to how you've defined this, Sir Richard. They say Iran could have built 15 nuclear bombs within days.
Well, that's it, as far as anybody commenting like me has ever been aware. And given the history of Israeli misrepresentations, they've been crying wolf about an imminent Iranian nuclear weapon since the 1990s. And Netanyahu has a particular record in this regard.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, it is time for you to have your say. Yeah. OK, here we go. Richard says the MP that sees women and children on boats is deluded. I advise he goes to Specsavers. That was 2 hours ago, so I've only just got round to it, but I do like that. Well done. Morning, Alex. All this talk of civil war brewing, well, put it this way. If this current government has not been removed pretty damn quick, there will be a civil war. People have had enough. That is Steph. Morning, Alex and Peter. Well, that's a few hours ago as well. Could one of you explain to me how a man, I say that loosely, can refuse to acknowledge the existence of rape gangs and get given a knighthood? I think that must be in reference to Sir Sadiq Khan, who when quizzed in mayoral question time by the Conservative leader Susan Hall about whether or not there were measures in place to protect young girls in London, because of course he doubles up as a police and crime commissioner, he pretended not to even know what she was talking about. Vile, abhorrent, weaselly little creature that he is. Hi, Alex, you're the best. Am I? I wouldn't, you know. Not people who know me think I'm a bit of a nightmare. Will Starmer cancel elections in 3 years' time because of all the boats they're emptying in the prisons, now ready for future protesters? We know what he's like. Well, do you know what? You know that lever they invented during lockdown, COVID, pull this and lock up the nation? You see what's happened in other parts of the world, in LA, where Gavin Newsom put on a curfew of people because of the rioting. You see what's going on in Ballymena. And my big concern is that whole stay at home and don't leave the house order could be given to the whole society when the ne'er-do-wells, the tow rags, the agitators, the thugs and the mini militias are all rampaging around our streets. A lot of us are going to be locked up, aren't we? That's what I foresee happening, and I don't look forward to it. So happy to hear your voice this morning. I do yoga. It's 12 quid a class, and my daughter is the teacher. Just saying. Well, I don't know if that was supposed to be an advert for you, Kate, because I don't know where you are or, you know, where people can find you to go and downward dog or warrior pose with you, but or cat cow maybe. But I wish you and your business all the best. Good morning. Who has got the bottle to deport every single person that's here illegally? It's not so much the bottle. It's also you need to unpick so much legislative framework. Now, that is going to be interesting. I think Nigel Farage, we spoke to him just a few moments ago, of course, is probably busy planning what he can put into the manifesto ahead of the 2029 general election that's going to have real and concrete results, because every party seems to have claimed they'll tackle this issue and fails to do so. The jury is still out, as they say. Let's speak to Karen, who's in Bournemouth. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Alex. Nice to see you so cheerful in our state of affairs.
Oh, well, you know, if you don't laugh, you cry, don't you?
There is that possibility, yeah.
So tell me, what's on your mind?
Well, I kind of have a question for you. We seem to have given away Chagos. We seem to be giving away Gibraltar. Are we giving away London by allowing the Chinese super embassy? Because America doesn't like it. Our own security doesn't like it. And I heard Peter Carl the other day saying, oh, don't worry, we'll sort out that during the planning.
Oh, yeah, we'll sort it out. This is a government that have sent more ministers over to Beijing than anywhere else. Rachel Reeves somehow decided to go and talk about the economic woes of Britain as newly appointed Chancellor over in Beijing. What it's got to do with China, I don't know. They've all been going over there. The Business Secretary Starmer himself wants a proper, full, you know, leader of a country visit. I'm like, can you just leave the Chinese alone? I mean, I think with Chagos, part of the problem is clearly that Lord Hermer, who seems to be the wokest, most anti-British establishment barrister in the land, who now happens to be the Attorney General. But London hasn't just been handed to the Chinese. This goes back to Cameron and Osborne. Every single other nation on earth, especially Gulf states and the Chinese, seem to now own a stake of London. There's very little which we own ourselves anymore. There's very little which we control ourselves anymore. All of our critical infrastructure is largely in the hands of foreign companies. Even the old county hall where until recently Sadiq Khan moved everybody down to near the Excel Centre in London, which is like basically not even in London anymore. It's kind of miles out of town. And the old building, which has only been there about 8 years or something, all of that and the land around it's been bought by Kuwait. What are they planning to do with that? Are they also going to build some sort of mega embassy for such a tiny little fuel-powered country? They're going to build a mega mosque on the banks of the Thames. I don't know. Why is everything being sold off to international parties? It's a travesty. And not just that, when you look at the levels of inward migration, there's a prediction now, an estimation, should I say, that 1 in 12 people in London are illegals. I'd fancy it's a lot more than that. But I'll tell you what, I don't know what it's like down in Bournemouth, Karen, but London, you don't hear English anymore. You don't.
Well, I lived in London and I left in, I think it was 2017. And it was beginning then, I noticed, that you didn't see your own language.
Yeah.
Notices in all the shops were in other languages. And the local park was getting filled up.
Well, what's it like down in Bournemouth? Because if there's one thing, I don't know much about Bournemouth. I don't often frequent Bournemouth. But if there's one thing that's put Bournemouth in headlines over the course of recent years is the attacks that seem to happen on the beach in Bournemouth. And it seems to me that these often take place when a load of men from Cardiff or London, and I'm doing air quotes there because very often they don't appear to be, native born, judging by their names, seem to go on a day trip to the beach and get rather excited about the fact that there are scantily clad women there.
Well, we've also had a couple of fights between, groups of refugees and things, but it seems to be getting much more violent since when I arrived in 2019. And I'd known Bournemouth for quite a while anyway. And it seems that recently it's just an awful lot more violence going on.
Yeah, no, it's I must admit it's a shame when you see problems that used to be big city problems spreading out to all the most beautiful corners of Britain. Karen, thank you ever so much. Karen in Bournemouth there. Let's have a listen to some voice notes now, shall we? This is Susan.
Hi Alex, Sue in Worthing here. I have a theory in terms of the illegal migrants. I do believe that it's possible governments are setting them up in hotels and treating them well, and in return for asylum seeking they will be asked or expected to fight in the army or the navy in return for their status here. Then when we go to war, not just civil war, then we have a ready-made army. Is this an absolutely crazy theory? Or do you think there's something in it? I mean, by allowing people to walk across a field in Dover, directed by customs officers, sounds like we're actually helping them do something.
Well, Susan, in response to your question, I have no doubt that some of these men have been very well placed inside militias. I'm sure they've come from countries where there is conflict and war and have even served themselves, and they're young men of fighting age. Do I think that this government is going to suddenly convert them into a frontline force to protect the British interest? No. Of course not. First of all, even if that was a good idea, I wouldn't actually give any credit to the governments for having a good idea and being able to execute it. Secondly, the security checks. It'd be extremely difficult to be able to verify who these people are, where they come from, what their intentions are, in order to enrol them within our armed forces. And number three, would they do it? No. If they were going to fight, I'd imagine it'd probably be against the country and not for it, which is what is the most chilling aspect of all of it. But I do think we should put these young men to good use and make them do hard labour. I don't mean sort of chain gangs breaking rocks at the side of the road, but there's so many jobs that we're told, well, the British people just won't do them. They won't clean public toilets, they won't scrub graffiti, they won't work in agriculture. Well, do you know what? If you've come to this country illegally, maybe you should be put up in some sort of secure dormitory and made to go out and actually do some work, right? Use some elbow grease to say thank you for all that free money and the shelter and the food you're getting courtesy of the British taxpayer, because it doesn't make sense to me coach loading in loads of people from Eastern Europe to do these jobs that apparently the British won't do, although I don't understand why the British won't do it. When my mum was growing up in Evesham, she used to go and pick fruit and vegetables it was during the holidays. It was a normal thing that college students did back then. But anyway, that's my 2 bits on that. That is what I think. Let's hear now from Michael.
Hi Alex, what a brilliant show. It's Michael from Norwich. I heard you say that London has not got many people like us anymore, or not, you didn't say exactly like that, but London's not very English anymore. Most of the people who were born in London who are English have moved to Kent and Essex. But what worries me is I think Sadiq Khan will become Prime Minister, and then the Labour Party will have achieved all their dreams to destroy Britain, and all the people who were born here, the English people, will have to be moving to another country because they won't want what London has become, and England will the UK will be exactly the same. Thank you, Alex.
Michael, you should not scare a woman like that live on air. If I knew what was going to be in that voice note, I wouldn't have been sipping tea at the moment that you said you think Sadiq Khan's going to be the next Prime Minister. Blimmin' hell, that is the end of Western civilization if that happens. But I wouldn't put it past him. He's very ambitious, and I'm sure that if they want to sort of reattach themselves to the sectarian voting blocs that backed pro-Gaza MPs the last time round, Sadiq Khan is their man. I mean, Lord knows there's probably some lunatics and delusioned psychopaths out there, or people who just don't get politics, or perhaps want to see the decimation of this country, who would actually back a Khan premiership. But like I said, I almost choked on my tea. Thank you for that, Michael. All right, when we come back after the break, we're going to be going through everybody who has made the King's Honours List. Some interesting names, some predictable names, some surprising names. All of that's coming up after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it is Trooping of the Colour today. It marks the King's birthday. Happy birthday to you, your Madge. And the other thing that happens when the monarch celebrates the anniversary of their birth is they dish out a load of prizes in the form of honours. That is right. And a number of people have been given various combinations of letters behind their names, or even honorifics before their names. To find out who and why, let's speak now to Leslie Russell, who's an awards and honours expert at Awards Intelligence. Leslie, I think the biggest name, potentially, arguably the biggest name to come out with an honour is someone who doesn't surprise anybody, really. Apparently he's been hankering it for some time, and that is David Beckham.
Yeah, I think David Beckham, it was announced a week or so ago, but a really crowning honour for a national legend and long awaited, like you said. There's no doubt that he meets the honours criteria of being at the top of your profession, but also as a global icon in sport and fashion and public appearances, he meets the criteria of enhancing Britain's reputation on the world stage, which is just as important. And of course his charity work, with the King's Foundation and 20 years as a UNICEF ambassador. That meets the honours criteria of voluntary service and philanthropy.
I mean, let's go through other people on this list. I understand that Tess Daly and Claudia Winkleman are up for gongs. What are they getting?
Yeah, they're getting MBEs, the Strictly Come Dancing presenters. And Tess actually said that she almost didn't get it because the letter went to her old address. And thankfully somebody passed it on, otherwise she wouldn't be on that list today.
Who else? Gary Oldman, he's up for one.
I'm really pleased about that. I think Gary Oldman is acting royalty. And, you know, he got his Oscar for playing Winston Churchill in 2018. And yet, until last night, he was the only British Oscar winner this century not to have any gong at all. And, of course, he was brilliant in Slow Horses too.
And Roger Daltrey, famous former frontman of The Who, him of the Main, he's up for something.
Yeah, so he's a knight as well, so Roger Daltrey, as of last night. And what I think is cool about this is that his charity work is with the Teenage Cancer Trust. Now, Roger Daltrey is 81, and all his charity work is for teenagers. And talking of teenagers, what about Luke the Nuke Littler, the 18-year-old darts champion? He became the world's youngest darts champion this year. So fantastic that you've got an 81-year-old and you've got an 18-year-old.
And there are people who sort of say about Luke Littler, of whom I'm a big fan. I love the fact he's taken on the world of darts by storm and actually really helped to promote it on the world stage. But where's the community service attached to this? You're only 18 years old. You might be prolific in your sport at such a young age. But where has been the service to UK PLC to deserve an honour?
Yeah, I think with somebody like Luke, it's inspirational that he's encouraging others. He comes from Warrington. He is showcasing on the world stage, hey, look what we Brits can do. We've got a teenager who's world champion. And I think that's really important. It's a really competitive world out there, Alex, as you know. And this is soft power for Brits being up there saying, look at these Great Britons, look what we can do.
And finally, I've got on my list here, and I'm sure you've got a lot more, Anita Dobson, Angie Watts from EastEnders.
Oh, I've got a soft spot for this one. Her OBE is for philanthropy, so it's the work she does as a patron of Thames Hospice. But I love to think of her standing behind the bar, pulling pints in the Queen Vic with the gong pinned to her chest. And, you know, it's not just the celebs. 9 out of 10 people on the list last night are ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And if you know somebody you think is worthy, get in touch with us here at Awards Intelligence and we can give you a free, honest assessment of whether they may be eligible, because it's the medics and it's the scientists doing fantastic work to treat horrible diseases, and it's brave and bold people who put their bodies on the line to do charity fundraising in your community, in business, friends and family. You know, if you know somebody, put them forward. Let's get ordinary people on that list.
Now, an idiot's question, because I actually don't know the answer to this. If you are knighted, as is the case for David Beckham and Roger Daltrey, do you then have to choose a kind of place so you become Sir David Beckham of somewhere? Or is that for peerages?
That's for peerages, for the House of Lords. But yeah,
I was wondering what David Beckham might choose in that particular instance, but we're never going to know. The question's never going to be asked.
Yeah, and just think about the fantastic day they're going to have. They're going to go to the palace or Windsor Castle with the knights. The king will be there with the sword, you know, tapping them on the shoulder. And for everybody who gets an honour, being there with your family, dressed up in all your finery, an absolutely unforgettable day.
Yeah, well, there you go. If you know an ordinary person, perhaps a radio presenter you think deserves an award in the next round of the King's Honours, Leslie Russell is there at Awards Intelligence. You can let her know your recommendation. The team there will do an assessment whether or not they think that that person deserves some sort of official national gong. I can't think of anybody, really. Actually, I can think of various politicians who I think have done great service to the nation, and I'm still waiting for them to be at some point recognised. One of them we might have spoken to earlier, just saying. That was Leslie Russell there. Let's do some of your messages before we go to break. Great to see you presenting this morning. I'm your biggest fan, says Sarah in Cambridgeshire. Take good care. Thanks, Sarah. That's sweet. Aw. Great chat with Nigel. About the honours list, I can get my head around two silly, highly paid Saturday night TV presenters getting honoured for being two silly, highly paid TV presenters. Yet, you know what? Like, when it comes to people like, I'm like, I don't really like all the gongs for celebs. I like someone getting a gong when they've really done something that has materially changed the United Kingdom. And I worry a bit if too many celebs get gongs, it's sort of, it doesn't really have the same impact anymore, does it? Hi, Alex. I'm moving from Somerset back to London. All the problems that London have now filtered down here. Parks full of migrants, groups of men hanging around the shop, doctors full of migrants, non-English speaking people. The whole area has changed. So you're moving what? From the glorious West Country, where there's half-decent cider and sensible folk, back to London? Careful what you wish for. But brave you, can I just say. I wouldn't leave Somerset if I were you. It's one of God's own counties, that one. Gorgeous place. Alex, this honour system is a joke. They dish these things out like Smarties, so it consequently devalues them. No way should David Beckham become a Sir or anyone else relevant to sports, despite whatever else they do, says Gary in Shrewsbury. I think if some people have been particularly meteoric and important in a particular discipline, be it sport, acting, music, or healthcare, or whatever it may be, they should be recognised. But it's when you get these people who, they win a gold medal at the Olympics, and you're like, well, great, yeah, you've worked really hard and trained to get that, but right, what else are you doing? Working down a soup kitchen, are you? Morning, Alex. Let's all hope Nigel Farage does what he says when he gets in and sorts out all the local councils and the country. Keep up the good work, says Andy in Rotherham. Alex, Nigel and Reform are the only party which can save the British way of life. The French should be prosecuted for allowing boats to go out to sea in a dangerous condition, as it's a danger to life. Good morning, Alex. Someone says, good to hear. That is Malcolm in Hampshire. Good to hear, Nigel Farage. The most damaging aspect of where this country is right now is the loss of hope. But we now have hope in Reform, and it gives impetus to ordinary people like us. Lots of positive messages coming out after that interview of Nigel. If anyone can do it, Nigel can, says Kathy. We all need hope. And he is now the only person that offers that, and I believe he means what he says. I despair how this country is falling apart so quickly, right before our eyes. We need change, and we need Nigel and Reform. Alex, the most influential politician of our time, will never get a knighthood, says Brad in Cambridge, referring to Nigel Farage. Let's all hope Nigel Farage does what he says when he gets in. Someone else saying, let's hope he can deliver. Thank God we have a true Brit that believes in politics for the British people. Nigel Farage is the Prime Minister we desperately need, says Steve from Cambridge. And Pete, the mole, apparently, says, Alex, spot on with your views this morning. Something radical will need to happen in the UK to save our way of life, but I fear time is getting short and near to the point that it's irreversible. That's my worry as well. Like I said, you've got 4 more years left of Labour, and then when Reform gets in, there's a lot of stuff they're going to have to do. I said when they get in, we don't know if they will. If they get in, first of all, they need a whopping majority to be effectual at all. And then there's a great amount of work having to sort of uproot a load of canon of human rights legislation, leave the ECHR. All of these things will be taken to trial by leftist lawyers, judicial reviews. There'll be protests. You'll have the lefty politicians trying to stop it. Or remember what it was like a Brexit? Yeah? You remember the 4 years of turmoil where the politicians and judges were all trying to stop Brexit from happening? You think they're not going to do the same with leaving the ECHR? Of course they are. They're going to inflame things even more. The time of which we're going to be able to start sending loads and loads of people in, Hercules, it would be Airbus A380 or something, whatever it would be, back from whence they came, is going to be in about 10 years' time. I'm not sure we're going to have the patience to wait that long. That's my worry, looking at what's kicking off in Ballymena. Right, OK, thank you ever so much for your messages. I'll try and do a few more before I close up for the day, but after the break, we're joined by the wonderful, gorgeous, bubbly, enthusiastic and always erudite Kinsey Schofield, host of Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered. You know what she's going to be talking about. That's right, the demonic couple of Montecito. Let's hear all the latest news from her after this.
their response couldn't be more different to how you've defined this, Sir Richard. They say Iran could have built 15 nuclear bombs within days.
Well, that's as far as anybody commenting like me has ever been aware. And given the history of Israeli misrepresentations, they've been crying wolf about an imminent Iranian nuclear weapon since the 1990s, and Netanyahu has a particular record in this regard.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. And I just want to say a great thanks to all of the people who have helped put this show together right now. All my wonderful producers. You got Tommy, you got Davis, you got Dean there, you got Tech Op, you got Luke. It's not Davis. See, Luke's just replaced Davis. I can only see the back of your head. Was it? I'm sure Davis was in there earlier. Have I gone mad? He was. Good. Don't look at me like that, Luke. I know I've been on air almost 4 hours, but I haven't yet lost the plot. I just want to say thank you to all those wonderful, hard-working members of staff, a wonderful team I have around me. Unlike, one might say, for Harry and Meghan, who yet again seem to have axed their entire staff body. That's right. Nothing says that you're impossible to work for a bit of a ball ache and an axe grinder than constantly cycling through various members of staff like hot dinners. Well, that's exactly what has happened. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have given their communications team the boot, blaming them for a series of recent PR humiliations. They've instead decided to go with the firm behind that controversial twerking video. Did you see it? Do you want to see it? Do you want to be reminded of it? Do we even have it in our storage? I don't know. If we've got any sense, we won't. No, Tech Up Dave's like, no, of course we don't keep stuff like that. I bet it's there somewhere. But it was just really pathetic. You know, I was like, what is going on? I get the impression that all of the things they've tried to do seriously, and I put seriously inside dits, such as, I don't know, launch a Grenfell cookbook, make a podcast, have a series on Netflix, set up a charity. None of that stuff has worked. They've been damn hopeless at everything. So it seems to me they're resorting to becoming basically a version of the Royal Kardashians. Way, we can't wait for it. Let's speak now to Kinsey Schofield, host of Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered. Kins, how are you doing, my darling?
I'm so excited. I'm getting ready to go stand in the trooping line and to see the big parade. I'm at the Mews right now watching the carriages get ready. I'm here. I'm excited about your country. Unfortunately, Harry and Meghan are not. How rude.
Harry, don't you look so cute? Kins, amazing. I remember my mate Belinda and I went to actually watch the coronation. We camped on the Mall for 3 days. It was one of the best experiences of my life. So talk to me, what is going on with Harry and Meghan? Yet another change of the guard. Who have they fallen out with this time and why?
Well, you know, this is after we were informed that they were hiring this team of 11 and that they were going to try to almost have their own little royal court and craft things differently. I mean, ultimately, it does seem like they're trying to compete with the British royal family, which is it's just absolutely impossible to do from Montecito, from Hollywood at all. I mean, this is a 1,000-year-old institution that has done this, and they've learned so many lessons, and Harry and Meghan continue to not. I mean, there's no real justification for the termination, but I know that you know at this point in time, we've hit like 20 people that they've blown through since they've moved to California. And how negative, I mean, how like toxic must this workplace be to burn through so many people and accomplish so little? I mean, what can you and I, we can't toss around anything that's actually been completed. I mean, Confessions of a Female Founder, okay.
Yeah, what's gone on with that thing? Is that thing still being made, or did it only make about 2 episodes? Because the previous one she did, what was it called? Like the
Archetypes.
Oh, that. I mean, they're basically the same thing, aren't they? But one lot had famous guests, whereas now no one likes us, so they have to have unfamous guests.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we haven't heard about a season 2 coming to fruition, which is so interesting because they've wrapped season 1. And remember, like within hours after season 1 of Meghan's Netflix series, she was announcing a season 2 of that show. So I wonder if Limonada has realized that the return on investment just isn't there. Also, I don't think Meghan likes interviewing people. I think she'd prefer to talk about herself.
Ah, you can say that again. What about the season 2 of that woe-begotten cookery programme, which was basically Meghan just taking things out of packets and putting them into different packets and tying ribbons around it and pretending she was some sort of Grace Kelly of the hospitality world? I mean, are they genuinely making a second series? Because I thought the viewing figures were so blimmin' low, they didn't even bother advertising it on Netflix. They just hid it down the menu.
Well, you're right. It dropped within like 48 hours. It was off the top 10. And based on our jobs, there were so many people that were actually assigned to watch it that I wouldn't be surprised if the top 10, it made the top 10 just because of people like us having to watch it to discuss it. Hey, season 2 was shot along with season 1, so she was always going to get a quote-unquote season 2 because they shot them back to back. There's no big celebratory, I'm so successful, I secured a season 2. Netflix was just like, you know what, let's save a buck and create a couple of more of these while we've rented this foreign house that's not Meghan Markle's and she's in the kitchen. Let's just kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So it's already been shot. It exists. It will be released in the fall. But the victory lap she took about its success was, classic Meghan, as inauthentic as she is.
Now, let's talk about something that is authentic, quintessentially British, and that is Trooping of the Colour. Great to see you going today. What are you looking forward to the most?
Okay, I mean, I would be lying if I said that my favorite part is not Prince Louis. What a legend. I can't wait to see. He'll be scolded by his big sister. He'll be making silly faces. He's just absolutely, he's so free-spirited. And it's completely opposite to everything that Meghan and Harry try to tell us that the monarchy is about. Harry will say, oh, they're in a prison. Oh, it must be they're so miserable. They're in this prison. And you just see how free-spirited, happy, sweet, and happy-go-lucky Prince Louis is. And you get the sense that that's not the truth. So Prince Louis, I love seeing Catherine, the Princess of Wales. It was a year ago that we saw her for the first time after her cancer diagnosis. So to see her happy and healthy is obviously a thrill. And, we've got to acknowledge how wonderful it is to see the king continue to get up, never complain, never explain. This is a man going through cancer treatment, and we're seeing him almost every day. I mean, God bless him.
Yeah, he is. He's showing great fortitude. Kinsey, it's always wonderful. You're in the country. Let's go for a cocktail, and I mean that. I'm going to be messaging you after this because I love you to bits. And whatever advice you hear from anyone about surviving the wild streets of London, just don't have your mobile phone out on display. You will be mugged, okay? Just warning you. When you take those photos, get it back in the handbag, strap around both shoulders, because this is a lawless London we live in now. The wonderful Kinsey Schofield, thank you ever so much. Hello, Mr. Cardwell.
Hello, how are you? Did you have the heat on in this?
I know, I saw the first thing. The first thing I do when I come into the studio is I put that up right up to full blast. I started off with a little jacket and now I've taken it.
Can you have the heat on a day like today in the studio?
Because it's freezing cold in this studio.
No, it's not.
Normally when I come in off the back of Mike Graham on a Friday, it's like entering a walk-in fridge in a restaurant. It's horrible.
Right. Okay, like Boris Johnson.
Basically, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But basically, this is why air conditioning is sexist, because men tend to run at a higher body temperature than women, so they turn it all the way down, plus they often sit there in suits. You, however...
I also have more insulation than you.
Not so much sitting in a suit. If the viewers could only see what was going on under that desk.
And they never will.
Yeah.
Yes, no, I've got shorts on.
Yeah,
which is,
they're quite some choice shorts as well. The top half says naughty schoolboy, the bottom half says I've been expelled.
Like the sartorial equivalent of a mullet.
Exactly, yes. It is like the sartorial, exactly. Right, so have you seen the new migrant numbers?
Crazy. I mean, that's the problem. They're surprising, but also unsurprising. We're talking about that today as well. We're also talking about another night of violence in Northern Ireland. The story so many people.
I wanted to ask you about that.
Well,
I mean, as a man from those particular hinterlands, what's it like? I mean, I didn't know whereabouts you're from in Northern Ireland.
It's my local town that's involved. Portadown last night. A further night of trouble.
How does that make you feel? I mean, this is a bit like,
it's very sad. No, it's very sad. And I grew up and a lot of this was happening when I was kind of mid-teens. A lot of disturbances that are sectarian sectarian. Now it's about racism, and it's just really sad to see, because there are people who have genuine concerns about immigration. There was on Monday night there was a march, a peaceful march, then it turned violent, and there have been these disturbances ever since. But I mean, there's a woman I'm in touch with who's been in her road for 44 years, you know, never seen anything like it. It's really a very, very difficult time.
Astonishing bit by Nigel in The Sun today, Nigel Farage, talking about he's very worried about ongoing and continued civil unrest if mass migration isn't sorted.
Well, listen, I think this summer could be, I hope it won't be, but I can see